Chicago never sleeps. It groans through the midnight traffic, whispers through the marble lobby, and bleeds neon lights on the rain-soaked streets where tailored power and violence lurk behind expensive smiles. Vivian Mercer, 28, had mastered the art of pretense. By day, she managed high-end real estate. By night, she went home to Caleb Rayner, a charming but obsessive lover whose love had slowly transformed into surveillance, humiliation, and bruises hidden beneath his designer blouse. One Monday morning, Vivian arrived late to a meeting, limping from the wounds Caleb had inflicted the night before. She thought no one would notice, but at the head of the table sat Damian Varelli, a real estate billionaire whom Chicago called a philanthropist, but the criminal underworld knew by a different name. Damian noticed it all, and when the meeting ended, he stopped her with a cold statement that shattered the fragile illusion holding her life back. Someone hurt you. If you want to know how Vivian escaped that hell, and why a mafia boss is more dangerous yet safer than her ex-boyfriend, follow this story to the end. Don't forget to like and comment where you're watching from so I know how far this story has progressed. The rain hit Chicago like broken glass that Monday morning, sharp and relentless, drumming against the plate glass windows of Blackthorn Holdings' 43rd floor. Vivian Mercer stood in the women's bathroom, her hands braced against the cold marble sink, staring at her reflection like it belonged to someone else. The bruise on her collarbone was almost hidden. Almost. She'd layered foundation over it twice, then added powder, then a silk scarf arranged just carefully enough to look casual. The limp was harder to disguise. Her left knee throbbed where Caleb had shoved her into the coffee table last night, his voice calm, even as his hands weren't, always explaining why she'd made him do it. She was 20 minutes late to the executive meeting. 20 minutes that would require an apology she'd have to make sound sincere, even though her entire body was screaming that nothing about this morning was fine. Vivian pressed her lips together, reapplied the lipstick that made her look alive, and walked out of the bathroom with the kind of smile that had kept her employed for 3 years. The smile that said she had her life together. The smile that lied. The conference room was already full when she slipped inside, murmuring apologies to the 7 people seated around the polished table. Her boss, Gerald Moss, barely looked up from his tablet. 2 junior associates smirked at each other. Naomi Vale, the company's chief legal counsel, gave her a tight nod that might have been sympathy or impatience. Vivian couldn't tell anymore. And at the head of the table sat Damian Varelli. Vivian had seen him before, of course. You didn't work at Blackthorn without knowing who owned half the skyline. But she'd never been in the same room with him, never felt the weight of his presence like a physical thing pressing against her ribs. He was younger than she expected, maybe 35. Dark hair, dark suit, darker eyes that tracked her movement across the room with the kind of attention that made her skin prickle. She sat down quickly, too quickly, and her knee buckled just enough that she had to catch herself on the edge of the chair. No one said anything, except Damian kept watching. Gerald launched into his presentation about the River North project, numbers and timelines bleeding together while Vivian tried to focus on her notes. Her phone buzzed in her purse. Then again. Then a third time in rapid succession. Caleb. She didn't need to look to know what the messages said. Variations on the same theme. Where are you? Why aren't you answering? You're being dramatic again. I love you, but you make this so hard. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs under the table, willing them still, willing her face blank, willing herself invisible. Ms. Mercer? Damian's voice cut through the room like a blade, quiet but absolute. She looked up, throat tight. Yes? The tenant complaint log for 900 North Michigan. You handle that property, correct? I do. Her voice came out steady. That was something. Walk me through the resolution process. Vivian didn't hesitate. This she could do. This was safe. She recited the procedures with mechanical precision. Complaint intake, priority assessment, contractor assignment, follow-up protocols. Every word in its place, every answer correct. Damian listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he said, and if the issue isn't resolved within the contracted timeline, we escalate to senior management and offer tenant compensation per the lease agreement. Good. That was all. One word. But something in the way he said it made her feel like she'd passed a test she didn't know she was taking. The meeting dragged on for another 40 minutes. Budgets, zoning permits, legal reviews. Vivian took notes she'd never read again, her knee throbbing in time with her pulse. When Gerald finally dismissed them, she stood carefully, gathering her things with slow, deliberate movements that wouldn't draw attention. "Ms. Mercer, a moment," Damien's voice again, quieter this time. Everyone else filed out, Gerald shooting her a curious look over his shoulder. Naomi paused in the doorway, her sharp eyes flicking between Vivian and Damien before she left without comment. Then it was just the two of them. The rain hammered against the windows. 43 floors below, the city moved like it always did, indifferent, relentless, too loud to hear anyone screaming. Damien stood, buttoning his suit jacket with the kind of casual precision that spoke of money so old it didn't need to announce itself. He walked around the table slowly, not toward her but to the window, giving her space she hadn't asked for but desperately needed. "How long?" he asked, still looking at the city. Vivian's stomach dropped. "I'm sorry? How long has someone been hurting you?" The words landed like a fist to the chest. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't lie fast enough. I'm not... She stopped, hating how her voice cracked. "I don't know what you mean." Damien turned to face her then, and there was nothing soft in his expression, nothing kind, just cold, brutal clarity. "You're limping. You favored your left side when you sat down. There are finger-shaped bruises on your collarbone that you tried to cover with makeup and a scarf." His voice was clinical, detached, listing facts the way other men listed stock prices. "Your phone has been vibrating in your purse every 3 minutes for the past hour, and every time it does, you flinch." Vivian felt her face go hot, then cold. You don't understand." "I understand perfectly." "No." The word came out sharper than she intended. "You don't." Damien studied her for a long moment, his gaze stripping away every lie she'd built around herself. "Does he know where you work?" he asked. It's not like that." "Does he know where you work?" "Yes." The admission tasted like ash. Damien nodded slowly, like she'd just confirmed something he'd already known. He pulled a business card from his jacket and set it on the conference table between them. "My private number," he said, "not the corporate line. When you're ready to stop pretending this is something you can survive alone, call it." Vivian stared at the card like it might explode. "Why would you—" "Because I know what men like him look like." Damien's voice dropped, cold and absolute. "And I know what happens to the people they decide to own." The way he said own made something inside her chest crack open. She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was wrong, that Caleb loved her, that it was complicated, that she could handle it, but the words stuck in her throat because they were all lies, and they both knew it. "I have to go," she whispered. Damien didn't stop her, didn't touch her, just watched as she grabbed her bag and walked toward the door on a knee that screamed with every step. She was almost out when he spoke again. "Vivian." She froze, her hand on the doorframe. "You don't owe him your life." She didn't turn around, didn't answer. Just walked out into the hallway where the fluorescent lights were too bright and her phone was buzzing again. 15 messages. She opened them even though she knew better. "You think you can ignore me? I see the location turned off." Real mature. "I'm coming to your office. We need to talk. You're embarrassing yourself. I love you. Why do you make me worry like this?" Vivian closed her eyes and leaned against the wall, her hands shaking so badly she almost dropped the phone. She should call him, should apologize, should go home and make this right before it got worse. Except it was always getting worse, and for the first time in 3 years, someone had looked at her and seen through the performance. She slipped Damien's card into her pocket and went back to her desk. The rest of the day passed in a blur of emails and tenant calls and pretending everything was fine. Vivian's knee swelled until she could barely bend it, but she kept moving, kept smiling, kept answering questions like her life wasn't falling apart in real time. At 6:30, she packed up her desk and took the elevator down to the lobby. Caleb was waiting by the revolving doors. He looked good. He always looked good. Tall, clean-cut, with the kind of smile that made strangers trust him instantly. He worked in finance, made decent money, knew how to dress, how to talk, how to make people believe he was exactly what he appeared to be. A nice guy. Vivian's stomach twisted into knots. "Hey, babe." His voice was warm, concerned, like they were meeting for a romantic dinner instead of another fight disguised as a conversation. "You okay?" You weren't answering. I was working. She kept her tone neutral, her face calm. Long day. I know. He reached for her hand, his grip was just a little too tight. That's why I came to pick you up. Thought we could grab dinner, talk things through. She wanted to pull away, wanted to run, wanted to scream. Instead, she smiled. I'm really tired, Caleb. Can we just go home? His expression shifted, just a flicker, just enough to remind her what happened when she said the wrong thing. We need to talk about last night, he said, his voice dropping low. About why you're being like this. I'm not being like anything. See? That attitude. His smile didn't reach his eyes. That's what I'm talking about. You get so defensive. Vivian's chest tightened. This was the part where she apologized, where she made it better, where she took responsibility for his anger because it was easier than fighting. But something in her hesitated. Maybe it was the way Damien had looked at her. Maybe it was the business card burning a hole in her pocket. Maybe it was just exhaustion so deep it felt like drowning. I'm going home, she said quietly. Alone. Caleb's jaw clenched. Vivian, I'll call you tomorrow. She turned toward the street, looking for a cab, looking for air, looking for anything that wasn't the expression on his face. He caught her arm. Not hard enough to hurt, just hard enough to stop her. You're being dramatic, he said, his voice soft, almost pleading. You know I love you. Why do you do this? Let go. We're just talking. Let go of me. Someone cleared their throat behind them. Vivian looked up and her blood went cold. Damien stood 10 feet away, flanked by two men in dark suits who looked like they'd been carved from stone. His expression was calm. Too calm. Is there a problem? He asked, his voice carrying across the lobby like a gunshot. Caleb's hand dropped from Vivian's arm immediately. No, man. Just talking to my girlfriend. She asked you to let go. Yeah, and I did. So we're good. Damien took a step forward, just one, but the temperature in the lobby seemed to drop 10 degrees. You're going to leave now, he said quietly, and you're not going to contact Miss Mercer again tonight. Caleb's face flushed red. Who the hell are you? Someone who doesn't repeat himself. The two men in suits moved closer, their hands folded in front of them, their eyes flat and empty. Vivian's heart hammered against her ribs. This was escalating. This was dangerous. This was... Caleb held up his hands, forcing a laugh. Okay, I get it. Big man with bodyguards. Real impressive. He looked at Vivian and his smile turned cruel. This is the kind of guy you need now? Someone to fight your battles? Leave, Damien said. The word wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Caleb stared at him for a long moment, something ugly working its way across his features. Then he turned and walked toward the exit, his shoulders tight with rage. Just before he pushed through the doors, he looked back at Vivian. You're going to regret this, he said. Then he was gone. The lobby fell quiet except for the rain drumming against glass. Vivian couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't process what had just happened. Damien dismissed his security with a subtle gesture. They melted back into the shadows near the elevators, present but invisible. Are you hurt? He asked. She shook her head, not trusting her voice. Do you have somewhere safe to go tonight? That's when it hit her. She lived with Caleb. All her things were in his apartment, her clothes, her laptop, the few pieces of jewelry her mother left her. Everything she owned existed in a space he controlled. Her voice cracked. I don't know. Damien pulled out his phone and made a call. Naomi, I need a suite prepared at the residences. Personal security. Tonight. He paused, listening. Yes. Indefinitely. He hung up and looked at Vivian. You're not going back there, he said simply. I can't just... I have to get my things. No. The word was absolute. You don't go near him again, not alone, not unarmed, not ever. You don't understand, he'll what? Damien's eyes were cold. Hurt you? He's already doing that. Kill you? The question hung in the air like smoke. Men like him escalate, Vivian. They don't stop. They don't get better. They just keep taking until there's nothing left. Tears burned behind her eyes. She blinked them back hard. Why are you doing this? She whispered. Damien was quiet for a moment, his gaze distant. "Because someone should have done it for my mother," he said finally, "and no one did." The words landed like stones in deep water. Before Vivian could respond, a black car pulled up outside the building. One of Damien's security opened the rear door. "The residents are 10 blocks north," Damien said. "Top floor. No one gets in without clearance. You'll be safe there." "I don't have any clothes. Anything." "We'll handle it." "I can't afford—" "This isn't a negotiation." His voice softened, just slightly. "And it's not charity. Consider it a temporary employee benefit while we sort out the security situation." Employee benefit. He was giving her an exit, a way to accept help without feeling owned. Vivian looked at the car, then back at Damien. "What do you get out of this?" she asked. He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Peace of mind. It was a lie. Or maybe not a lie, but not the whole truth. Vivian had spent 3 years learning to read the space between words, and she knew Damien was holding something back. But right now, she was too tired to care. She got in the car. As it pulled away from the curb, she looked back through the rain-streaked window and saw Damien still standing in the lobby, watching her leave. Her phone buzzed. Caleb's name lit up the screen. She stared at it for a long time. Then, for the first time in 3 years, Vivian Mercer turned off her phone and watched the screen go dark. And somewhere deep in her chest, something that had been holding her together for so long finally broke. The suite was obscene. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, marble everywhere, furniture that probably cost more than Vivian made in a year, a bedroom the size of her and Caleb's entire apartment. She stood in the middle of the living room, soaking wet from the rain, feeling completely out of place. A woman in her 50s arrived 20 minutes later with luggage. Vivian didn't own. Clothes in her size, toiletries, everything she might need for a week. She introduced herself as Marie, didn't ask questions, and disappeared as quietly as she'd come. Vivian showered until the water ran cold, watching the day circle the drain. She should feel relieved. Instead, she felt terrified. Because Caleb was right about one thing. She was going to regret this. Not because she'd made the wrong choice, but because Caleb would make sure she paid for it. She wrapped herself in a bathrobe that cost more than her car and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her silent phone. 43 missed calls. 62 text messages. She didn't need to read them to know what they said. Anger. Then apologies. Then threats disguised as concern. Then promises. Then rage. The cycle she knew by heart. Vivian picked up the phone and stared at the power button. If she turned it on, Caleb would know she was checking. He'd know she was thinking about him. He'd use that opening like a crowbar, prying her back into his orbit. If she left it off, he'd escalate. There was no good choice. Just different kinds of damage. She set the phone down and walked to the window, pressing her forehead against the cold glass. Chicago sprawled below her, indifferent and vast. Somewhere out there, Caleb was planning his next move. And somewhere closer, Damien Varelli had just made her his responsibility. Vivian closed her eyes and tried to remember what safety felt like. She couldn't. She'd forgotten years ago, but maybe, just maybe, she could learn again, if she survived long enough. She woke to knocking at 3 in the morning. Vivian shot upright, heart hammering, every muscle locked tight. The knocking continued. Steady, patient, not aggressive. She crept to the door and checked the peephole. One of Damien's security stood in the hallway, holding a manila envelope. She opened the door a crack, the chain still engaged. "Miss Mercer, this just arrived for you." He handed her the envelope through the gap. "Mr. Varelli wanted you to have it immediately." He left before she could ask questions. Vivian carried the envelope to the kitchen island and opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a thick stack of legal documents. Restraining order paperwork already filled out. A lease agreement for the suite she was standing in, rent-free for 6 months. Bank account information for an emergency fund with $5,000 already deposited. And a handwritten note on heavy cardstock. "You have options now. Use them. D." Vivian read the note 3 times, trying to find the catch. Men didn't do this. Not in her experience. Men took. Men demanded. Men made you feel grateful for the scraps of kindness they threw between the cruelty. But Damien had given her weapons. Legal protection, financial independence, space to breathe, All the things Caleb had spent 3 years taking away. She should be suspicious, should question his motives, should wonder what he wanted in return. Instead, she sat on this cold marble floor and cried until she had nothing left. Because someone had seen her, really seen her, and that terrified her more than anything Caleb had ever done. San. Morning came too fast. Vivian woke disoriented, her body aching from sleeping on the floor. She'd fallen asleep against the kitchen island, the legal documents scattered around her like evidence. Her phone was still off. She turned it on. Instantly, it exploded with notifications, messages, voicemails, missed calls climbing past 80. She didn't read them. Instead, she called the number on Damien's business card. He answered on the first ring. "Are you safe?" No greeting, just the question. "Yes." "Good." A pause. "Did you get the documents?" "I did." "Naomi can help you file the restraining order today, if you're ready." Vivian closed her eyes. "I don't know if I'm ready." "That's okay." His voice was steady, calm. "The documents will wait, but you should know. He's been in the building lobby twice since midnight. Security turned him away both times." Her stomach dropped. "He knows I'm here?" "He knows you're in a Blackthorn property. He doesn't know which one." Damien paused. "And he won't get close enough to find out." "This is insane." "Yes." I should go talk to him. Explain." "Don't." The word was sharp. "That's what he wants. He's creating a crisis so you'll come running to fix it. It's a pattern, Vivian. And every time you respond, you teach him the pattern works." She wanted to argue, wanted to say Damien didn't know Caleb, didn't understand how he thought. But the words died in her throat. Because Damien was right. She'd been running to fix Caleb's crises for 3 years. "What do I do?" she whispered. "Right now, nothing. Let him scream into the void. Let him realize you're not coming." Another pause. "And when you're ready, we make it legal." We. Like she wasn't alone anymore. The concept felt foreign. "Why are you helping me?" Vivian asked. Damien was quiet for a long moment. "Because I can," he said finally. "And because I've watched men like him operate my entire life. They don't stop, Vivian. Not until someone makes them." "Are you going to make him?" "If necessary." The way he said it, cold, certain, absolute, should have frightened her. Instead, it felt like the first solid ground she'd stood on in years. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay? I'll file the restraining order." She heard the approval in his silence. "Naomi will meet you at 10. She'll walk you through everything." He paused. "And Vivian?" "Yes?" "Turn your phone off. Stop giving him access to your peace." Then he hung up. Vivian stared at the phone in her hand. 87 messages. She opened the thread one last time. The first messages were angry. "You're being childish. This is ridiculous." Then concerned. "I'm worried about you. Please just talk to me." Then threatening. "You're making a huge mistake. You think that guy cares about you? He's using you." Then desperate. "I love you. I can't lose you. Please. I'm sorry." The cycle she knew by heart, weaponized across the screen. Vivian took a breath. Then she blocked the number and turned the phone face down on the counter. Her hands were shaking. But for the first time in 3 years, they weren't shaking from fear. They were shaking from something that felt dangerously close to hope. Naomi Vale arrived at 9:45, sharp and efficient, carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than Vivian's car. "Let's skip the pleasantries," she said, settling onto the couch. "I've seen your medical records from the emergency room visits you told them were accidents. I've seen the police reports you filed and withdrew. I know exactly what we're dealing with." Vivian's face burned. "How did you—" Damien Virelli doesn't do anything halfway. Naomi's expression was unreadable. When he says to protect someone, we protect them. That means gathering every piece of evidence that might be useful. That's invasive? Yes. Illegal, debatable, necessary? Absolutely. Naomi opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "Caleb Rayner has violated your boundaries 83 times in the past 6 months that we can prove. The actual number is likely triple that." Vivian stared at the folder like it contained something toxic. "I didn't know anyone was counting," she whispered. Someone should have been. Naomi's voice softened, just barely. The restraining order is a formality at this point. We have enough documentation to bury him in legal consequences if he violates it, but you need to understand something. What? A piece of paper won't stop him. It'll slow him down. Give us legal leverage. But men like Caleb don't respect boundaries. They resent them. Naomi leaned forward. He's going to escalate, and when he does, you need to be ready. Ready how? Don't engage, don't respond, don't negotiate. Naomi counted off on her fingers. Every time you interact with him, you give him ammunition. Every conversation is a foothold. Every explanation is a weakness he'll exploit. Vivian's throat tightened. You sound like you've done this before. I have. Something hard flickered across Naomi's face. I lost a friend to a man like Caleb. She kept thinking she could make him understand, kept believing love would be enough. Naomi's jaw clenched. It wasn't. The words hung heavy in the air. I'll file the paperwork, Vivian said quietly. Good. Naomi pulled out a pen. Let's get started. They spent 2 hours going through documentation, hospital visits, text messages, witness statements from neighbors who'd heard shouting, photographs of bruises Vivian had forgotten she'd taken, evidence of a nightmare she'd been living through while calling it love. By noon, the restraining order was filed. By 1, Caleb would be served. By 2, Vivian's old life would officially be over. What happens now? She asked as Naomi packed up her briefcase. Now we wait and see if he's smart enough to back off. Naomi paused at the door. But Vivian, if he contacts you, even once, you call me immediately. Violating a restraining order is criminal. We can have him arrested. He'll lose his job. Good. Naomi left and Vivian sat in the vast silence of the suite, trying to process what she'd just done. Somewhere across the city, Caleb was about to be handed legal papers that would shatter his carefully constructed image. He would be furious, and Vivian knew exactly where that fury would land. The call came at 7 that evening. Not from Caleb, he was blocked. From his mother. Vivian stared at the unknown number lighting up her screen, debating whether to answer. On the 4th ring, she picked up. Hello? Vivian? Oh, thank God! Patricia Rayner's voice was thick with tears. I've been trying to reach you for hours. What is going on? Vivian's chest tightened. Mrs. Rayner? Caleb is devastated. He showed me the restraining order. Vivian, how could you do this to him? The familiar guilt crashed over her like a wave. Patricia had always been kind to her, always welcoming, always making Vivian feel like family. It's complicated, Vivian managed. He loves you. He made a mistake, yes, but everyone makes mistakes. You don't destroy someone's life over a mistake. It wasn't one mistake. He's getting help, Patricia's voice rose. He's already made an appointment with a therapist. He knows he has anger issues, but you filed a restraining order like he's some kind of monster. He hurt me. The words came out flat, empty. Silence. Then quieter. He said you've been having an affair with your boss. Is that true? Vivian's blood went cold. What? He said you've been staying in some man's apartment, that he's been manipulating you, turning you against Caleb. That's not what's happening. Then come home. Talk to him. Work this out like adults instead of running away. Running away. Like leaving someone who hurt you was cowardice instead of survival. I can't, Vivian said. Can't or won't. Both. Patricia's breath hitched. I thought you were better than this, Vivian. I thought you understood what commitment meant. The words hit like a slap. I have to go, Vivian whispered. Wait. She hung up. Her hands were shaking again. This was what Caleb did. When he couldn't reach her directly, he weaponized the people around them, turned her into the villain, made everyone believe he was the victim. And it was working. Vivian could already imagine the narrative spreading through their friend group. Vivian's having an affair. Vivian's being manipulated. Vivian broke Caleb's heart over nothing. No one would ask about the bruises. No one would question his version. Because Caleb was charming and Vivian was quiet, and people always believed the story that required the least disruption to their comfort. She was still staring at her phone when it rang again. Damien, this time. Patricia called you, he said. not a question. How did you... I've been monitoring the situation. Caleb's already reached out to 14 mutual contacts claiming you're unstable. His voice was clinical. It's textbook Darvo. Deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. I don't know what to do. Nothing. You do nothing. This is noise designed to make you react. A pause. Are you okay? Vivian almost laughed. No. Fair enough. She heard something shift in the background, fabric maybe, like he was moving. I'm sending a car, have dinner with me. I don't think, not a date, a strategy session. His voice softened, just slightly. You shouldn't be alone right now. He was right. The silence of the suite was pressing in on her, and every shadow looked like Caleb's rage waiting to materialize. Okay, she whispered. 30 minutes. He hung up before she could change her mind. Vivian stood and walked to the window, watching the city lights blur through her reflection. Somewhere out there, Caleb was building his defense, and somewhere closer, Damien Varelli was building her a fortress. She didn't know which one scared her more. The restaurant was on the top floor of a building Damien owned, closed to the public but somehow fully staffed, private, quiet. The kind of place where power brokers made deals that never appeared in newspapers. Vivian felt absurdly out of place in the clothes Marie had provided. Expensive, but not hers, like wearing someone else's skin. Damien was already seated when she arrived, still in his suit from earlier, reading something on his phone. He looked up when she approached and stood, the gesture automatic. You didn't have to... she started. Sit. He gestured to the chair across from him. Please. She sat. A waiter appeared with wine she didn't order and disappeared before she could refuse it. You've done this before, Vivian said. Done what? Rescued people. Damien's expression didn't change. I've helped people extract themselves from dangerous situations. I wouldn't call it rescue. What would you call it? Leverage. The honesty surprised her. So I'm what? A project? You're someone in crisis who works for my company and is being terrorized by a man with escalating behavior patterns. Damien leaned back in his chair. Helping you is practical risk management. The fact that it's also the right thing to do is secondary. Vivian studied him, trying to find the catch. You don't trust me, Damien observed. Should I? Probably not. A ghost of a smile. But I'm not the one you need to worry about right now. The waiter returned with food, something elegant Vivian didn't recognize but tasted expensive. They ate in silence for a while. Then Vivian asked the question that had been burning in her chest all day. Your mother. You said someone should have helped her. Damien's fork paused halfway to his mouth. He set it down carefully. You don't have to... Vivian started. My father was a very powerful man, Damien said quietly. Controlled half of Chicago's construction industry. Controlled the unions. Controlled the politicians. His jaw tightened. He controlled my mother the same way. And when she finally tried to leave, he made sure no one would help her. No lawyer, no shelter, no police report that didn't disappear. What happened to her? She died when I was 16. Car accident. The words were flat. Except it wasn't an accident. Everyone knew it. No one could prove it. Vivian's chest tightened. I'm sorry. Don't be. It was a long time ago. Damien picked up his wine glass, staring into it like it held answers. But it taught me something important. What? Power without accountability is just another word for violence. He looked at her directly. So I made sure I had enough power that no one could ignore accountability. Vivian understood then. This wasn't kindness, it was atonement. Damien couldn't save his mother, so he saved women like her instead. You're not responsible for what happened to her, Vivian said softly. I know. He set down the glass. But I'm responsible for what I do with the resources I have now. They finished dinner talking about safer things. Her work, the properties she managed, the ridiculous requests from high-maintenance tenants. Normal conversation that felt surreal given everything else. When the meal ended, Damien walked her to the car waiting outside. Thank you, Vivian said. For tonight. For all of this. Don't thank me yet. His expression was serious. Caleb's going to get worse before he gets better. And when he does, I need you to promise me something. What? Don't go back to him, no matter what he says, no matter how much he apologizes or threatens or manipulates. Damien's eyes were dark. Men like him don't change. They just get better at hiding what they are. Vivian wanted to argue, wanted to defend Caleb, or maybe defend her own choices, or maybe just defend the version of herself that had believed love was supposed to hurt this much. But she was too tired for lies tonight. "I promise," she whispered. Damien nodded, satisfied. She got in the car and watched him disappear into the building. On the drive back to the residences, Vivian's phone buzzed. A new message from an unknown number. She opened it before she could stop herself. "You think you're safe? You think he can protect you? You don't know who you're dealing with. Come home before this gets ugly." Her hand started shaking. She showed the message to Damien's security when she arrived at the suite. They forwarded it to Naomi. Within 20 minutes, the number was traced, documented, and added to the growing file of restraining order violations. Within 40 minutes, police were at Caleb's apartment with a warning. Within an hour, Vivian received a text from Naomi. "He's been formally notified. Next violation means arrest. You're safe." But Vivian didn't feel safe. She felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff watching the ground crumble beneath her feet. Because Caleb wasn't going to stop. He was going to escalate. And when he did, Vivian realized with cold certainty someone was going to get hurt. She just didn't know who yet. The first violation came 3 days later. Vivian was walking to the corner coffee shop 2 blocks from the residences, her first solo trip outside the building since moving in. Damien's security had cleared it, told her the route was monitored, told her she'd be fine. They were wrong. She saw him through the window before she even reached the door. Caleb sat at a corner table, coffee untouched, eyes locked on the entrance like he'd been waiting for hours. Maybe he had been. Vivian's stomach lurched. She turned to walk away, but he was already moving, pushing through the door before she could retreat. "Vivian, wait! No!" She kept walking, her heart hammering. "You can't be here. There's a restraining order." "I know." He fell into step beside her, hands shoved in his pockets, voice low and urgent. "I know, okay? But I need to talk to you. 5 minutes, that's all. I'm calling the police." "Please," the word cracked. "Please, Viv, just listen." She stopped on the sidewalk, people streaming past them, the morning cold biting through her jacket. "You have 1 minute." Caleb's face was haggard. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Part of her wanted to feel sorry for him. Part of her remembered that this was exactly what he wanted, for her guilt to override her survival instinct. "I'm getting help," he said. "Real help. I've been seeing a therapist 3 times a week. I know I fucked up. I know I hurt you. But we can fix this." "There's nothing to fix." "Don't say that." His voice rose, then dropped when she flinched. Sorry. I love you. That doesn't just disappear because some lawyer filed paperwork. You violated the restraining order. Because I knew you wouldn't see me otherwise." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration bleeding through the careful composure. "And that guy, Varelli, he's in your head, making you think I'm some kind of monster." "Damien didn't make me think anything. You did that yourself." "By making mistakes? By losing my temper a few times?" Caleb stepped closer. "Everyone loses their temper, Viv, but you're acting like I beat you or something." The words landed like a slap. Vivian stared at him, really looked at him, and saw the rewriting happening in real time. The bruises became accidents. The terror became overreaction. The pattern became isolated incidents. And he believed it. That was the most terrifying part. Caleb actually believed his own revision of history. "I'm leaving," she said. "Vivian?" She pulled out her phone and called the number Naomi had given her. It rang once before a voice answered. "Miss Mercer?" "He's here, outside the coffee shop on East Huron." "Stay on the line. Officers are 2 minutes out." Caleb's expression shifted from desperate to furious in a heartbeat. "You're seriously calling the cops on me for trying to have a conversation? You violated a court order." "Because you won't listen to reason." His voice cracked. "I'm trying to save us, and you're treating me like a criminal." "You are a criminal. The moment you came within 500 feet of me." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Caleb heard them too, his jaw clenched, something ugly working across his features. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is. You think you can just walk away? After 3 years?" He leaned in close enough that she could smell coffee on his breath. You think that billionaire gives a shit about you? You're nothing to him. A charity case, a distraction. He'll get bored and throw you away. And when he does, I won't be waiting anymore. The police car rounded the corner, lights flashing. Caleb backed off immediately, hands up, innocent smile sliding into place. I was just leaving, officers. No problem here. 2 cops got out, hands resting on their belts. The older one looked at Vivian. You okay, ma'am? He violated the restraining order. That true? The cop looked at Caleb. We were just talking. 500 feet, Vivian said quietly. The order specifies 500 feet. He was less than 10. The cop's expression hardened. Sir, I'm going to need you to come with us. This is ridiculous. Now, sir. Caleb's face flushed red, but he didn't resist. He let them guide him toward the car, shooting Vivian a look over his shoulder that promised consequences. Then he was gone. Vivian stood on the sidewalk, shaking so badly she could barely hold her phone. Ms. Mercer? The voice on the line pulled her back. Are you hurt? No. The word came out thin. I'm okay. We're sending a car to bring you back to the residences. I can walk. Protocol, ma'am. Stay where you are. The black car arrived 3 minutes later. Same driver who'd taken her to dinner with Damien. He didn't ask questions, just opened the door and waited. Vivian got in and watched the city slide past, feeling nothing and everything at once. By the time she reached the suite, Naomi was already there, perched on the couch with her laptop open and that expression she wore when someone had made a tactical error. He lasted 3 days, Naomi said without preamble. That's actually longer than I expected. He's been arrested? Detained. He'll be formally charged by this afternoon. Violating a restraining order is a misdemeanor in Illinois, but combined with the harassment evidence, we can push for enhanced penalties. Naomi looked up. How are you feeling? Vivian sank into the chair across from her. He looked terrible. Good. He said he's getting help, therapy. Of course he did. Naomi's voice was flat. That's the script. They always get therapy after they get caught. After someone files paperwork, after consequences become real. She closed her laptop. Let me ask you something. In 3 years, did he ever suggest therapy before this? Vivian opened her mouth, closed it. No, she admitted. Because he didn't think he needed to change. He just needed you to accept being hurt. Naomi's expression softened slightly. I'm not saying therapy can't help, but it's a tool, not a magic cure. And men who only seek help when they face legal consequences aren't usually committed to real change. The words settled heavy in Vivian's chest. What happens now? He'll be arraigned, probably released on bail with stricter conditions. If he violates again, we push for jail time. Naomi paused. But Vivian, you need to understand something. The legal system is a blunt instrument. It can slow him down. It can create consequences, but it can't make him stop caring that you left. What does that mean? It means the next few months are going to be difficult. He's going to try every angle, mutual friends, social media, work connections. He'll make himself the victim. He'll make you the villain, and some people will believe him. Vivian thought about Patricia's phone call, the accusation in her voice. They already do, she said quietly. Naomi stood, gathering her things. Then let them. You're not responsible for managing other people's perceptions. You're responsible for staying alive. The starkness of the statement hit like cold water. After Naomi left, Vivian sat in the vast silence of the suite and pulled out her phone. Against every instinct screaming at her to stop, she opened Instagram. The first post she saw was from Caleb. A photo from 6 months ago, the two of them at a friend's wedding, smiling, his arm around her waist. The caption read, Missing better days. Some people are worth fighting for, even when they're confused about what they want. Love doesn't give up. Hashtag never give up. Hashtag real love. 300 likes already. The comments were worse. You deserve better, man. She doesn't know what she's losing. Stay strong, brother. She'll realize her mistake. Vivian scrolled through them, each one a small knife sliding between her ribs. Then she saw one that made her blood run cold. Who is this Varelli guy she's staying with? Sounds sketchy, Caleb had replied. Just someone taking advantage of a vulnerable situation, but the truth always comes out. Vivian's hands started shaking. He was building a narrative, publicly, carefully, painting himself as the heartbroken boyfriend and her as the confused victim being manipulated by a predatory older man. And people were buying it. She should delete her account, should block everyone, should disappear from social media entirely. Instead, she took a screenshot and sent it to Naomi. The response came back in seconds. Document everything. Don't engage. We're building a case. Vivian set down the phone and walked to the window, pressing her forehead against the glass. 43 floors below, Chicago moved like it always did. Indifferent, relentless. Somewhere out there, Caleb was being processed through the system. And somewhere closer, Damien Varelli was about to find out that protecting her was more complicated than he'd anticipated. The call came that evening. Damien's voice was tight when he spoke. "We need to talk." "About what?" "Not over the phone. I'm sending a car." 20 minutes later, Vivian was back in Damien's private office on the 62nd floor of Blackthorn Holdings. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, dark wood, expensive art that probably cost more than most people's houses. Damien stood by the window, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, looking like a man who'd spent the day putting out fires. "Caleb made bail 2 hours ago," he said without turning around. Vivian's stomach dropped. "Already?" "His family has money, not my level, but enough to post bond and hire a decent lawyer." Damien finally looked at her. "But that's not the problem." "What's the problem?" "He's threatening to sue me." Vivian blinked. "For what?" "Alienation of affection, tortious interference, a dozen other bullshit charges his lawyer probably told him won't stick." Damien's jaw tightened. "He's claiming I coerced you into leaving him, that I'm using my position and resources to manipulate you." "That's insane." "It's strategic." Damien crossed to his desk, pulling up something on his computer. "He can't get to you directly anymore, so he's trying to get to me. Make this expensive. Make it public. Force me to choose between protecting you and protecting my reputation." Vivian felt sick. "I'll tell them it's not true." "It won't matter. The accusation alone is enough to create problems." Damien looked at her directly. "My business operates in a very specific ecosystem. Politicians, developers, investors, people who care about optics. A messy domestic situation involving an employee creates questions I can't afford right now." The words landed like stones. "You're saying I'm a liability." "Oh, I'm saying Caleb is making you into one." Damien's voice softened. "Which is exactly what he wants. Drive a wedge between us. Make you feel guilty for the consequences. Make you think this is your fault." "Isn't it?" "No." The word was absolute. "Caleb made every choice that brought him here. You're just the one who finally stopped accepting the damage." Vivian sank into the chair across from his desk, exhaustion settling into her bones. "What do I do?" Damien was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "You let me handle it," he said finally. "How?" "The way I handle everything." His voice was cold, quietly, efficiently, permanently. Something in his tone made her look up sharply. "What does that mean?" "It means Caleb thinks he's playing a game he understands. Money, lawyers, public pressure." Damien leaned against his desk. "But he's operating in my city, with my resources, against my infrastructure." "You're talking about something illegal." "I'm talking about leverage." Damien held her gaze. "Everyone has something they don't want exposed. Caleb's no different. I find it, I use it, and this ends." Vivian's chest tightened. "I don't want you to..." "To what? Protect you?" His voice sharpened. "That ship sailed the moment you walked into that conference room with bruises you tried to hide. I made a choice then. I'm not unmanning it now because Caleb decided to escalate. But if you get caught, I won't." The certainty in his voice should have been reassuring. Instead, it was terrifying. Because Vivian realized she was watching Damien Varelli stop pretending to be a legitimate businessman and start being whatever he actually was underneath the expensive suits and polite boardroom language. "I need to know something," she said quietly. "What?" "What are you?" Damien studied her for a long moment. "Honest answer?" "Yes. I'm what happens when you grow up watching the people with power abuse it and decide the only solution is to have more power than they do." He crossed his arms. "My family built this city. Not through construction contracts and real estate deals, through control, unions, shipping, political appointments. The infrastructure most people don't see, but everyone depends on. You're talking about organized crime. I'm talking about the way power actually works. Damien's voice was flat. The courts are slow, the police are understaffed, the shelters are underfunded, but men like Caleb operate with impunity because the systems designed to stop them don't work fast enough or care enough. He paused. So yes, I operate outside those systems when necessary, because sometimes necessary is the only thing that saves lives. Vivian should have been horrified, should have walked out, should have called Naomi and asked for a different kind of protection. Instead, she asked, "What did you find on Caleb?" Something shifted in Damien's expression, not quite a smile. Too cold for that. He's been embezzling from his employer for 8 months. Small amounts, clever cover, but traceable if you know where to look. Damien pulled up a file on his computer. He's also been seeing someone else, a paralegal in his office building, started 2 weeks before he put his hands on you the first time. The information landed like a series of gut punches. He was cheating? Consistently. While accusing me of... Vivian couldn't finish the sentence. The hypocrisy was too vast. Classic projection, Damien said. Accuse you of what he's doing, so you're too busy defending yourself to notice his behavior. Vivian stared at the screen, at the evidence of Caleb's double life laid out in spreadsheets and time-stamped photographs. What are you going to do with this? Depends. Damien closed the laptop. If he backs off, nothing. The information stays buried and he gets to keep pretending he's the victim. And if he doesn't, then his employer gets an anonymous tip. His girlfriend gets the photos, and the state's attorney gets the financial records. Damien's voice was quiet. He loses his job, his reputation, and possibly his freedom, all without me laying a finger on him. It was ruthless, efficient, exactly what Damien had promised. You've done this before, Vivian said. More times than I'd like to count. Something weary crossed Damien's features. You think you're the first woman who needed protection from a man the system couldn't stop fast enough? How many? Does it matter? Yes. Damien looked at her for a long moment. 12 in the past 5 years. What happened to them? They're safe. New cities. New names in some cases. New lives. He paused. I don't keep tabs. That's not the point. What is the point? That they got a chance to rebuild without looking over their shoulder. Damien's jaw tightened. Something my mother never got. The grief in his voice was old but not healed. Vivian stood and crossed to the window, staring out at the city lights bleeding into the night sky. I don't know if I can do this, she said quietly. Do what? Accept this much help. Be this much trouble. Owe this much. You don't owe me anything. Damien's voice was firm. That's not how this works. Then how does it work? He was quiet for a long time. I don't know yet, he admitted. The honesty surprised her. Vivian turned to look at him, this powerful man who could dismantle lives with a phone call, but didn't know how to articulate whatever was happening between them. I'm afraid of you, she said. I know. But not the way I'm afraid of Caleb. I know that too. What's the difference? Damien crossed to stand beside her at the window, close but not touching, giving her space even in proximity. Caleb's afraid of losing control, he said quietly. I'm afraid of becoming my father. He looked at her. So I'm very careful about how I use power, especially with people who can't fight back. I can fight back. Not against me, not yet. His voice was gentle. You're still learning how to fight at all. The truth of it settled between them. Vivian had spent 3 years surviving. She hadn't learned to fight, hadn't learned to set boundaries, hadn't learned that she was allowed to say no without justifying her existence. Teach me, she said. Damien's expression shifted. What? Teach me how to fight back, how to... She struggled for words. How to be the kind of person Caleb can't manipulate anymore. That's not something I can teach. Why not? Because you already are that person. Damien's voice was quiet. You just don't know it yet. Before Vivian could respond, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and his entire demeanor changed. I need to take this. He stepped away, speaking in rapid Italian to someone on the other end. Vivian couldn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. Business, serious. The kind of conversation that reminded her exactly who Damien Varelli was when he wasn't being careful around her damage. He hung up and turned back to her, something hard in his expression. I have to go. Is everything okay? It will be. He grabbed his jacket. Stay in the residences tonight. Don't go out. Don't answer the door for anyone except security. Damien, please. The words stopped her. Just tonight. Tomorrow we'll figure out next steps. He was already moving toward the door. Vivian followed him. Where are you going? He paused, hand on the doorframe, and for a moment she saw something dangerous flicker across his features. Something that reminded her he was more than a real estate billionaire in an expensive suit. To have a conversation, he said quietly. Then he was gone. Vivian stood in the empty office, her reflection staring back at her from the dark window. She didn't know what conversation Damien was having, but she knew it had something to do with Caleb, and she knew that whatever happened next would change everything. The news broke on those morning shows. Vivian woke to her phone vibrating with notifications. Text messages from numbers she didn't recognize. Emails from reporters. Missed calls from blocked numbers. She opened Twitter and her stomach dropped. Breaking. Chicago finance executive arrested on embezzlement charges. The headline sat above a photo of Caleb being led out of his office building in handcuffs, his face a mask of shock and fury. Vivian's hands started shaking. She opened the article. Caleb Rayner, 31, a senior analyst at Meridian Financial Group, was arrested early this morning on charges of embezzlement and wire fraud. According to sources, Rayner allegedly diverted over $200,000 from client accounts over an 8-month period. The investigation began after an anonymous tip led authorities to irregularities in account reconciliations. Rayner is also currently facing charges for violating a restraining order filed by a former girlfriend. His attorney declined to comment. Vivian read it 3 times, the words blurring together. This was Damien. It had to be. The anonymous tip, the timing, the surgical precision of destroying Caleb's life in less than 12 hours. Her phone rang. Damien. She answered with shaking hands. What did you do? What needed to be done? His voice was calm. He's facing federal charges now. That's 5 to 10 years if convicted. You said you'd only use the information if he didn't back off. He didn't. He posted bail and immediately started contacting mutual friends, spreading lies about you, building a harassment campaign. Damien paused. I warned you he'd escalate. This is what escalation looks like from my end. Vivian couldn't breathe. You destroyed his life. He destroyed his own life the moment he started stealing. I just made sure the consequences caught up with him. People are going to know it was you. No one knows anything except that Caleb Rayner is a criminal who got caught. Damien's voice was firm. And even if they suspect I had something to do with it, they can't prove it. The evidence is real. The crime is real. I just expedited justice. Vivian sank onto the couch, her head spinning. This is too much. This is exactly enough. Damien's voice softened slightly. Vivian, listen to me. Caleb was never going to stop. Not with restraining orders, not with court dates, not with therapy. He was building towards something worse. I saw the pattern. I've seen it before. You don't know that. Yes, I do. The certainty in his voice was absolute. Men like him don't accept losing. They escalate until someone gets seriously hurt or killed. So I made sure he didn't have the freedom to escalate anymore. The logic was brutal. It was also probably right. I need to think, Vivian said. Take all the time you need, but stay in the residences. The media is going to come looking for you eventually, and you don't want to be accessible when they do. He hung up before she could respond. Vivian sat in the silence, staring at her phone, trying to process the fact that Damien had just dismantled a man's entire existence in less than a day. For her. Because of her. The knock on the door came an hour later. Vivian checked the peephole and froze. Naomi stood in the hallway, her expression grim. Vivian opened the door. Have you seen the news? Naomi asked without preamble. Yes. Good. Naomi walked past her into the suite. Then you know Caleb's going to federal prison. Damien did this. Of course he did. Naomi set her briefcase on the kitchen island. And before you spiral into guilt about it, let me be very clear. Caleb committed actual crimes, real embezzlement, real fraud. Damien just made sure the evidence reached the right people. That's still justice, Naomi interrupted. Faster than the system usually allows, but justice nonetheless. She pulled out her laptop. However, we have a different problem now. What problem? Caleb's lawyer is going to argue that you and Damien conspired to frame him. That the restraining order, the arrest, the embezzlement charges, all of it is part of a coordinated attack by a powerful man trying to eliminate a romantic rival. Vivian's blood went cold. That's insane. It's also compelling if they can make it stick. Naomi opened a file, which is why we need to be very careful about how we proceed. What does that mean? It means you and Damien need to maintain strict professional boundaries until this is resolved. No dinners, no private meetings, nothing that looks like a personal relationship. The words hit harder than Vivian expected. We don't have a personal relationship, she said. Naomi looked at her with something close to pity. Vivian? I've worked for Damien for 6 years. I've watched him help a lot of women in bad situations. He's never once moved one into a luxury suite, never once had dinner with them, never once looked at them the way he looks at you. Vivian's face went hot. I'm not judging. I'm stating facts. Naomi's voice was gentle. But those facts create complications, especially now. What are you saying? I'm saying that if you care about Damien, if you care about protecting him from the fallout of protecting you, you need to create distance. Naomi closed her laptop. At least until Caleb's criminal case is resolved and the civil threats go away. The logic was sound. It was also unbearable, because somewhere in the past week, Vivian had started depending on Damien's presence in ways she couldn't articulate. The way he asked permission before touching her, the way he listened without judgment, the way he made her feel safe without making her feel small. How long? Vivian asked. Months, maybe a year. Naomi stood. I know that's not what you want to hear. What I want doesn't matter. It should. Naomi's expression softened. But right now, protecting yourself means protecting him too. After Naomi left, Vivian walked to the window and stared out at the city. 43 floors below, Chicago moved forward like it always did. Somewhere out there, Caleb was sitting in a cell, his carefully constructed life in ruins. And somewhere closer, Damien Varelli had just learned that saving someone came with consequences he couldn't control. Vivian pulled out her phone and typed a message she knew she had to send. We need to talk. About distance. The response came back in seconds. I know. I'll call tonight. She set down the phone and let the tears come. Because this was the cost of freedom. Not just escaping Caleb, but accepting that sometimes the people who saved you couldn't stay. Bekijk. The call came at midnight. Vivian was still awake, sitting by the window, watching the city lights blur through rain that had started falling an hour ago. Damien's voice was tired when he spoke. Naomi talked to you. Yes. She's right about the distance. Vivian closed her eyes. I know. It's temporary, Damien said. Once Caleb's case is resolved, once the civil threats die down, we can... He stopped. We can figure out what this is. What if there's nothing to figure out? Vivian's voice was quiet. What if I'm just someone you helped? And that's all this ever was? Damien was silent for a long time. Do you believe that? He asked finally. I don't know what I believe anymore. Fair enough. She heard him moving, fabric rustling. But I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to hear it. Okay. I've helped 12 women in the past 5 years. I gave them money, legal support, new identities when necessary. I never once thought about them after they left. His voice dropped. But I think about you constantly. What you're doing, whether you're safe, whether you're eating enough or sleeping or... He stopped. That's not professional concern, Vivian. That's something else. Her chest tightened. Damien, I'm not asking you to feel the same way. I'm not asking you to do anything except survive and heal. But when Naomi says I look at you differently, she's right. And you deserve to know that before we start pretending there's nothing here. Vivian couldn't speak. I'm going to step back now, Damien continued, because Naomi's right that protecting you means protecting my ability to keep protecting you. But I need you to know this isn't me walking away. This is me making sure Caleb doesn't get the satisfaction of destroying something before it even has a chance to exist. The rain hammered against the window. What if I can't do this? Vivian whispered. What if I'm too broken to ever— You're not broken. You're healing. There's a difference. How do you know? Because broken things don't fight back. His voice was gentle. And you've been fighting since the moment you filed that restraining order. Vivian let the tears fall silently, her forehead pressed against the cold glass. I'm scared, she admitted. Of what? That I'm going to wake up one day and realize I just traded one man's control for another's. The words hung heavy in the silence. Then don't trade, Damien said quietly. Don't give me control. Don't give anyone control. Just take the space and time you need to figure out who you are when no one's telling you who to be. It was the right answer, the only answer, and it hurt more than any lie would have. Okay, Vivian said. Okay? I'll take the space, the time, her voice cracked. The distance. I'll still be here, Damien said. Not close, but here, when you're ready. What if I'm never ready? Then I'll still be here. The certainty in his voice broke something open inside her. I have to go, Vivian whispered. I know. She hung up before he could say anything else. Then she sat in the dark and cried for the life she'd lost, the man she'd left, and the one she couldn't let herself want yet. The weeks that followed were brutal in their quietness. Caleb's case dominated the news cycle for 3 days before fading into the background noise of Chicago's endless criminal proceedings. His bail was revoked after he violated the restraining order for a third time, showing up at Vivian's old workplace, demanding to know where she'd gone. He was remanded to county jail pending trial. Vivian should have felt relief. Instead, she felt nothing. The numbness settled in like fog, thick and impenetrable. She went through the motions. Therapy twice a week with a counselor, Naomi recommended. Long walks through the city with security trailing at a discreet distance. Nights in the too big suite, staring at walls that cost more than most people's yearly salary. She didn't see Damien, didn't hear from him except through Naomi, who delivered updates with professional efficiency. The lease on the suite was paid through the end of the year. Her job at Blackthorn was secure, but she was on paid leave until things settled. Everything she needed was handled, except the one thing she wanted, which was to stop feeling like a ghost in her own life. One Thursday afternoon, 6 weeks after Caleb's arrest, Vivian sat in her therapist's office and finally said the thing she'd been avoiding. I think I'm falling in love with him. Dr. Sarah Chen didn't look surprised. With Damien? Yes. How does that feel? Terrifying. Vivian twisted her hands in her lap. Because I don't know if it's real or if I'm just transferring, replacing one attachment with another. That's a fair concern. Dr. Chen leaned back in her chair. What makes you think it might be real? Vivian thought about Damien asking permission before touching her, about the way he listened like her words mattered, about the careful distance he'd maintained even when she could feel him wanting to close it. He doesn't need me, she said quietly. Caleb needed me. Needed to control me, to have someone orbit his moods, to validate his existence. But Damien, she stopped. Damien would be fine if I disappeared tomorrow. His life wouldn't change. He'd just go back to building empires and dismantling problems. And that makes you feel safe. The word surprised her. It makes me feel safe because I'm not responsible for his emotional stability. I'm not performing to keep him calm. I'm just allowed to exist. Dr. Chen nodded slowly. That's insight, Vivian. Real insight. But it doesn't change the fact that I'm probably not ready for this. Probably not, Dr. Chen agreed. But readiness isn't always linear. Sometimes we heal while building something new. Sometimes we need to heal alone first. She paused. Which one do you think you need? Vivian didn't have an answer. She left the session and walked back to the residences through autumn air that tasted like coming winter. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. She almost deleted it without reading. Then she saw the first line and her blood went cold. You think you're safe because he's in jail? You think this is over? Caleb has friends, real friends. Who know what you did to him? We're watching. Vivian stopped walking, her hands shaking. She forwarded the message to Naomi, then to the security team. The response came back in minutes. Number is a burner. Untraceable. Increasing security protocols. Do not engage. But Vivian couldn't stop staring at the message. We're watching. She looked up at the street around her. Afternoon crowds, tourists, business people rushing between meetings. Any one of them could be watching. Caleb couldn't reach her anymore, but his rage had proxies now. And Vivian realized with cold certainty that this was never going to end. Not with court dates. Not with jail time. Not with distance. Caleb would haunt her forever unless she did something he couldn't predict. Something permanent. She pulled out her phone and called the one person who would understand. Damien answered on the first ring. What's wrong? I need to disappear, Vivian said. Silence. Then, I'll be there in 20 minutes. Ikak. He arrived in 15. Vivian met him in the private lobby of the residence, surrounded by security but somehow still alone. Damien looked exactly the same. Dark suit, careful composure, eyes that saw too much. But something shifted when he looked at her. The distance he'd been maintaining cracked just slightly. What happened? He asked. She showed him the message. His expression went cold. When did you get this? 30 minutes ago. Damien made a call, speaking rapid-fire instructions to someone on the other end. Then he hung up and looked at her. We're leaving. Now. Where? Somewhere Caleb's friends can't find you. He gestured toward the private elevator. Somewhere I can make sure you're actually safe instead of just theoretically protected. Damien, no. The word was firm. No arguments, no debates. You're in danger and I'm not leaving that up to chance anymore. Vivian should have resisted, should have insisted she could handle this alone. But she was tired of pretending she was strong enough to fight shadows. Okay, she whispered. They took the elevator to the parking garage where a car was already waiting. Damien opened the door and waited for her to get in. As the car pulled out into Chicago traffic, Vivian watched the city blur past the tinted windows and realized she was crossing a line she couldn't uncross. Leaving with Damien meant accepting she couldn't do this alone. It meant trusting him with more than her safety. It meant trusting him with her life. Where are we going? She asked quietly. Damien looked at her, and for the first time in weeks, he let her see past the careful control. Wisconsin, he said. My family's estate. It's secure. Private. No one knows about it except people I trust absolutely. How long? As long as it takes. The car merged onto the highway, Chicago shrinking in the rear-view mirror. Vivian closed her eyes and tried not to think about what she was leaving behind, or what she was driving toward. But deep in her chest, beneath the fear and exhaustion and numbness, something that had been frozen for years finally started to thaw. And she didn't know if that was salvation or just a different kind of danger. The estate appeared through the trees like something from another century. Stone and timber and glass hidden deep in Wisconsin forest, surrounded by security fences disguised as natural barriers. A main house that sprawled across the landscape with quiet wealth. Smaller buildings scattered through the property, guest houses, security stations, structures whose purpose Vivian couldn't guess. It was beautiful. It was also a fortress. The car stopped in front of the main entrance. Damien got out first, scanning the property with the kind of attention that spoke to training. Vivian didn't want to think about too closely. Then he opened her door and offered his hand. She took it. His grip was warm, steady, careful. Inside, the house was all dark wood and stone fireplaces and windows that framed the forest like living art. It smelled like pine and old money and safety. A woman appeared from a side hallway, older, efficient-looking, with kind eyes. Miss Mercer, I'm Eleanor. I manage the house. She smiled. Your room is ready. Second floor, east wing. I'll show you up. Vivian followed her up a wide staircase to a bedroom that was somehow both luxurious and comfortable. More windows overlooking the forest, a massive bed, a fireplace already burning low. Mr. Varelli said you might need some time to settle, Eleanor said gently. Dinner's at 7 if you're hungry. Otherwise, I can bring something up. Thank you. Eleanor left, closing the door quietly. Vivian stood in the center of the room, feeling displaced in time and space. 24 hours ago, she was in Chicago, trying to build a life alone. Now she was in a hidden estate in the Wisconsin wilderness, protected by a man who operated in shadows and controlled empires. A knock at the door pulled her back. "Come in." Damien stepped inside, keeping his distance. "Are you okay?" he asked. "I don't know." Vivian turned to face him. "Am I safe here?" "Yes." "How can you be sure?" "Because this property doesn't exist on any public record. Because the security team is people I've known for 20 years. Because Caleb and his friends don't have the resources to find you here." Damien paused. "You're safe, Vivian, I promise." She wanted to believe him. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now you rest, heal, figure out who you are when you're not running." Damien's voice was gentle. "And when you're ready, if you're ready, we figure out what comes next." "We?" He met her eyes. "If you want there to be a we." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility and danger, and something that felt dangerously close to hope. Vivian took a step toward him, then another. Damien didn't move, didn't reach for her, just waited with that infinite patience that made her chest ache. "I'm not ready," she whispered. "I know, but I want to be." Something shifted in his expression. "That's enough." Vivian closed the distance between them and pressed her forehead against his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady and sure through the expensive fabric of his shirt. Damien's arms came around her slowly, carefully, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. She just stood there in his embrace and finally let herself break. And Damien held her through it without asking for anything except the trust she was barely ready to give. Outside, the Wisconsin forest settled into twilight. Inside, Vivian Mercer took the first real breath she'd taken in 3 years and realized that sometimes the most dangerous thing wasn't falling. It was learning to trust someone to catch you, even when you didn't know if you'd survive the landing. The first week at the estate passed like a dream someone else was having. Vivian woke each morning to silence that didn't feel dangerous. She walked through the forest with security trailing invisibly through the trees. She ate meals Eleanor prepared without anyone criticizing portion sizes or asking why she wasn't hungry enough or too hungry or eating wrong. She existed without performing. It was disorienting. Damien kept his distance like he'd promised. She saw him at dinner most nights, where they talked about safe things, books, the property, Chicago news that didn't involve Caleb. He never asked about her therapy sessions, never pushed for intimacy, never made her feel like his patience had limits. It should have felt safe. Instead, it felt like waiting for something to collapse. On the 8th night, Vivian couldn't sleep. She wandered downstairs at 2 a.m. and found Damien in his study, surrounded by papers and laptop screens, looking like a man who'd forgotten what rest felt like. He glanced up when she appeared in the doorway. "Can't sleep?" "Too quiet," she admitted. "There's wine in the kitchen, or tea, if you prefer." Vivian walked into the study instead, drawn by the warm glow of the fireplace and the fact that Damien looked human for once instead of untouchable. "What are you working on?" she asked. "Damage control." He closed one of the laptops. "Caleb's lawyer is building a narrative, trying to paint me as a predator who targeted you to eliminate a rival." Vivian's stomach twisted. "Is it working?" "No, but it's creating noise." Damien leaned back in his chair, exhaustion evident in the lines around his eyes. "The truth doesn't matter as much as the story people want to believe." "What story do they want to believe?" "That powerful men are always villains." His voice was flat. "Which isn't wrong, historically, but it makes it harder to operate when you're actually trying to help someone." Vivian sat down in the chair across from his desk. "Do you regret it? Helping me?" Damien looked at her directly. "Never. Even though it's costing you? It's costing me noise, irritation, time." He paused. "You cost me nothing except sleep, and that's my choice." The honesty was stark. "I don't know how to repay this," Vivian said quietly. "You don't." Damien's voice was firm. "That's not how this works. I'm not keeping a ledger." "Then what are you keeping?" He was quiet for a long moment, firelight casting shadows across his features. "Hope," he said finally, "that you'll heal enough to build whatever life you want, with or without me in it." The words landed soft but heavy. Vivian stood and crossed to the window, staring out at darkness broken only by security lights hidden in the trees. "What if I don't know what I want?" she asked. "Then you have time to figure it out." "What if I'm afraid I'll want the wrong thing?" "Like what?" She turned to face him. "Like you." Damien's expression shifted, something vulnerable flickering beneath the careful control. "Why would that be wrong?" he asked quietly. "Because I don't know if it's real or if I'm just—" Vivian struggled for words. "Transferring, replacing Caleb's control with yours." "Is that what this feels like?" Damien stood slowly. "Me controlling you?" "No." "Then what does it feel like?" Vivian's chest tightened. "Like I'm standing at the edge of something I don't understand, and you're the only solid thing I can see." Damien crossed to stand in front of her, close enough that she could feel the heat of him, but not touching. "I'm not solid," he said. "I'm a man who built an empire on violence and compromise and pragmatism that most people would call immoral." His voice dropped. "You're looking at me like I'm safety, but I'm just another kind of dangerous." "I know." "Do you?" "Yes." Vivian met his eyes. "But you're the kind of dangerous that asks permission, and that makes all the difference." Something cracked in Damien's composure. He lifted his hand slowly, giving her every chance to step back, and touched her face with a gentleness that made her throat tight. "Tell me to stop," he said quietly. "I don't want you to stop." "Vivian—" "I'm afraid," she interrupted. "I'm terrified, but I don't want you to stop." Damien's thumb traced her cheekbone, his touch careful like she was something precious that might shatter. "We should wait," he said, "until you're—" "I'll never be ready enough." Vivian's voice cracked. "I'll always be too damaged, or too broken, or too afraid. So maybe I just need to stop waiting for perfect and start accepting real." Damien studied her face like he was looking for lies. "If we do this," he said slowly, "we do it my way." "What's your way?" "Slow. Careful. You control everything, speed, boundaries, how far we go." His hand dropped to his side. "And the moment you want to stop, we stop. No questions. No guilt." It was the opposite of every physical relationship Vivian had ever known. "Okay," she whispered. Damien leaned forward and pressed his forehead against hers, his breath warm against her skin. They stood like that for a long time, not kissing, just breathing together in the firelight. When Damien finally kissed her, it was soft and questioning and so gentle that Vivian felt something inside her chest crack wide open. Not because it was romantic, but because she finally understood the difference between being touched and being claimed. She kissed him back, tasting wine and exhaustion and something that felt dangerously close to hope. When they pulled apart, Damien's eyes were dark. "Bed," he said quietly. "Alone. We're not rushing this." Vivian wanted to argue, wanted to prove she was ready, wanted to collapse the distance between them in one desperate leap. But Damien was right. Slow meant she got to choose every step, and choosing was the one thing she'd never been allowed to do before. "Okay," she said. Damien walked her upstairs, his hand warm against the small of her back. At her bedroom door, he kissed her forehead and stepped back. "Sleep well," he said. Then he was gone. Vivian stood in her doorway, fingers touching her lips, feeling like the world had just shifted on its axis. She slept better that night than she had in years. Oh, the call came 3 days later. Vivian was in the kitchen helping Eleanor prepare lunch when Damien's phone rang. She watched his expression change from calm to cold in the space of a heartbeat. He stepped outside to take the call. When he came back 15 minutes later, something fundamental had shifted in his demeanor. "We need to talk," he said. Eleanor disappeared without a word. Vivian set down the knife she'd been using to chop vegetables, her stomach already twisting. "What happened?" Damien pulled out his phone and set it on the kitchen island between them. "Caleb's lawyer just filed new motions. They're alleging that I fabricated the embezzlement evidence." Vivian's blood went cold. "That's impossible. You said the evidence was real." "It is real." Damien's voice was tight. "But they found something. An email trail suggesting someone in my organization accessed Caleb's employer's servers 2 days before the anonymous tip was filed." "Did they?" "Yes." Damien's jaw clenched. I needed to verify the evidence before I handed it over, make sure it would stand up in court. That's not fabrication. No, but it creates reasonable doubt about the chain of custody. Damien ran a hand through his hair. They're going to argue I planted the evidence, that the whole thing is a setup. Vivian felt the room tilt. Can they prove that? They don't have to prove it. They just have to create enough doubt that the federal charges get dismissed. Damien looked at her directly. And if that happens, Caleb walks. The restraining order violations are misdemeanors. He'll serve maybe 60 days, then he's free. No. The word came out strangled. No, that can't. It gets worse. Damien's voice was flat. They're also filing a civil suit against me personally. Malicious prosecution, defamation, tortious interference. They're asking for $20 million in damages. Vivian couldn't breathe. This is my fault. This is Caleb's fault and his lawyer's strategy. Damien's voice was hard. But it means I need to make a choice. What choice? I can fight this. Tie it up in court for years. Burn money and political capital and eventually probably win. He paused. Or I can settle. Pay him off. Make this go away quietly. The implication hit her like a fist. You'd pay him, Vivian said slowly. You'd give Caleb money to make him leave me alone. If it keeps you safe, yes. That's extortion. That's pragmatism. Damien's expression was unreadable. I don't care about the money. I care about ending this before it escalates further. Vivian's hands started shaking. And what does Caleb get out of this settlement? Damien was quiet for a long moment. Freedom, drop charges, and an NDA that prevents him from ever contacting you or speaking about what happened. So he wins. He gets money and his freedom. You get safety. I get peace of mind. Damien's voice was firm. That's not him winning. That's everyone walking away alive. Vivian stared at him, trying to process the fact that the man who'd promised to protect her was now offering to pay off her abuser. I can't believe you'd even consider this, she said. I'm considering everything that keeps you safe. Damien's voice sharpened. You want me to fight him in court? Fine. We'll spend 2 years in depositions and hearings while his lawyer drags your name through the mud. They'll subpoena your therapy records, your medical history, every text message you ever sent. They'll paint you as unstable and me as a predator and Caleb as a victim. So we just let him win? We let him think he won. Damien leaned against the counter. And then we make sure he never comes near you again. How? The NDA includes a proximity clause. If he violates it, he forfeits the entire settlement and faces criminal charges. If he so much as Googles your name, I'll know. Damien's voice was cold. Money motivates men like Caleb more than revenge. Give him enough of it, and he'll move on. The logic was brutal. It was also probably right. But something in Vivian's chest was screaming that this was wrong. I need to think, she said. We have 48 hours to respond to the settlement offer. Damien straightened. After that, it goes to litigation. He left her alone in the kitchen. Vivian stood there shaking, trying to understand how the man who dismantled Caleb's life was now offering to rebuild it with cash. She didn't see Damien for the rest of the day. Eleanor brought dinner to her room. Vivian picked at it without tasting anything, her mind spinning. By midnight, she couldn't stand the silence anymore. She went looking for Damien and found him in the study again, staring at legal documents like they held answers. I need to know something, Vivian said from the doorway. Damien looked up. What? Did you fabricate the evidence? The question hung in the air like smoke. Damien's expression didn't change. Define fabricate. Did you create evidence that didn't exist? No. His voice was flat. Caleb was stealing. I just made sure the right people found out. But you accessed his employer's servers to verify what I already knew was there. Damien stood. Vivian, I'm not going to apologize for being thorough. The evidence is real. The crime is real. I just expedited justice. By breaking the law yourself? Yes. No hesitation. Because waiting for the system to work meant leaving you vulnerable for months or years. So I bent some rules to make sure Caleb faced consequences fast enough to actually protect you. Vivian's chest tightened. And now those bent rules are going to set him free. Maybe. Damien crossed to the window. Which is why I'm offering to settle, cut our losses, move forward. With Caleb $20 million richer. With you alive and safe, that's all I care about. The words should have been comforting. Instead, they felt like surrender. What if I don't want you to settle? Vivian asked. Damien turned to face her. Then we fight. And you need to understand what that means. Tell me. It means your entire life becomes public record. Every bruise, every hospital visit, every moment of trauma Caleb inflicted gets examined by lawyers and reporters and strangers on the internet. His voice was hard. It means watching him sit in a courtroom looking sympathetic while his lawyer paints you as a liar who seduced a billionaire to destroy her ex-boyfriend. I can handle it. Can you? Damien's eyes were cold, because I've watched this play out before. I've watched strong women get destroyed by litigation that turns their trauma into entertainment, and I won't do that to you unless you're absolutely certain you can survive it. Vivian wanted to argue, wanted to insist she was strong enough, but the truth was, she didn't know. How long do I have to decide? She asked. 48 hours. Vivian nodded and turned to leave. Vivian? She stopped. Whatever you choose, I'm with you. Settlement or fight. Your decision. The words should have felt empowering. Instead, they felt like one more impossible choice in a life that had become nothing but impossible choices. She went back to her room and didn't sleep. The next morning, Eleanor knocked on her door with breakfast and a message. Mr. Varelli had to return to Chicago. Business emergency. He said to tell you he'll be back tonight. Vivian ate mechanically, her mind elsewhere. She spent the day walking the property, trying to think through the decision that felt like choosing between two different kinds of damage. By late afternoon, she was standing at the edge of the forest when her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Her blood went cold. She almost deleted it without reading. Then she saw the first line and her world tilted. You think Damien's protecting you? Ask him about the other women. Ask him what happened to them. Vivian stared at the message, her heart hammering. She should delete it, should forward it to security, should ignore the obvious bait. Instead, she typed back, "Who is this?" The response came immediately. Someone who knows the truth. Check his office. Bottom drawer, left side of the desk. See what kind of man you're trusting with your life. Vivian's hands were shaking. This was manipulation, classic intimidation tactics. But the specificity of the instruction made her stomach twist. She looked back at the house. Damien was in Chicago. The study was empty. She absolutely shouldn't. Vivian walked back inside and climbed the stairs to Damien's study. The room was quiet, untouched since this morning. She stood in the doorway for a long moment, every instinct screaming at her to turn around. Then she crossed to the desk and opened the bottom left drawer. Inside was a locked metal box. Her chest tightened. She should stop, should close the drawer, should walk away. Instead, she looked for a key, found it taped to the underside of the drawer. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely fit it into the lock. The box opened. Inside were files, 12 of them, each labeled with a woman's name and a date range. Vivian pulled out the first one. Sarah Mitchell, 2019 to 2020. The file contained everything. Medical records, police reports, photographs of bruises, legal documents, and at the back, a single page that made Vivian's blood run cold. Subject relocated to Portland, Oregon under new identity. NDA signed. Monitoring terminated after 6 months. No further contact. She pulled out another file. Jennifer Zhao, 2020 to 2021, same pattern. Medical records, evidence of abuse, restraining orders. And at the back, subject relocated to Austin, Texas. NDA signed. Monitoring terminated. No contact maintained. Vivian's chest felt like it was caving in. She went through file after file, each one telling the same story. Woman in crisis. Damien's intervention. Relocation. NDA. Monitoring. Termination of contact. 12 women, 12 files. 12 women who'd been helped and then systematically erased from Damien's life. All the way at the bottom was a file that made her stop breathing. It had her name on it. Vivian Mercer, 2025 to present. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely open it. Inside was everything, medical records she didn't know he had. Photographs of bruises she'd never shown him, bank records, phone records. A complete dossier of her entire relationship with Caleb, documented with clinical precision. And at the very back, a handwritten note in Damien's writing. Pattern consistent with previous subjects. Severe trauma bonding. High risk for reconciliation without sustained intervention. Recommend isolation protocol minimum 6 months before reassessment. Vivian read it 3 times, the words blurring together. Isolation protocol. Subject. Pattern. She wasn't a person to him. She was a case study. Another broken woman in a long line of broken women he collected and relocated and monitored like she was part of some twisted rehabilitation program. The kiss they'd shared, the careful intimacy, the promises of patience, all of it was protocol. She was just number 13. Vivian's stomach lurched. She barely made it to the trash can before she vomited. When she could breathe again, she pulled out her phone with shaking hands and called the number from the text. It rang twice before someone answered. "You found them." The voice was female, familiar somehow. "Who is this?" Vivian demanded. "Someone who got out before I became another file in his collection." A pause. "My name is Sarah. Sarah Mitchell. I was number 1. Vivian's chest tightened. "What does he want with us?" "Control. Power. The satisfaction of playing savior." Sarah's voice was bitter. "Finds women in crisis. Promises protection. Makes himself indispensable. And then when you're completely dependent on him, he decides whether you're worth keeping or worth erasing." He's not like that, isn't he?" Sarah's voice sharpened. "How long have you been at that estate? Isolated from everyone you know, completely dependent on his money, his security, his decisions?" Vivian couldn't answer. "He made you feel special, didn't he?" Sarah continued. "Made you feel like you were different from the others, like what you had was real." "It is real. I thought so too. Until he got bored." Sarah's voice cracked. "Until I healed enough to have my own opinions and stopped being grateful enough for his taste. Then suddenly the protection ended. The money stopped. And I was relocated to a city where I didn't know anyone with an NDA that prevented me from ever talking about what happened." Vivian felt like the floor was dissolving beneath her. "He's going to do the same thing to you," Sarah said. "The moment you're no longer broken enough to need him, you become disposable. So get out now while you still can." "I don't believe you." "Check the dates on those files." Sarah's voice was cold. "Notice how none of the women lasted longer than 18 months. Notice how they all signed NDAs. Notice how not one of them is still in contact with Damien Varelli." Vivian looked down at the files scattered across the desk. Sarah was right. Every single woman had been terminated from his life after a set period. Relocated, erased, replaced. "What do you want from me?" Vivian whispered. "I want you to understand who you're dealing with before you make the same mistake I did." Sarah paused. "Damien Varelli isn't a savior. He's a collector. And you're just the newest addition to his gallery of broken things." The line went dead. Vivian stood in the study, surrounded by evidence of Damien's systematic approach to saving women, and felt her entire reality crumbling. Everything he'd said, everything he'd done, every careful touch and gentle word. All of it was part of a pattern he'd perfected over 12 iterations. She wasn't special. She was just next in line. The sound of a car in the driveway made her freeze. Damien was back. Vivian shoved the files back into the box, locked it, replaced the key, closed the drawer. Her hands were still shaking when she heard his footsteps on the stairs. She barely made it out of the study before he appeared at the top of the landing. "You're still up," he said, something warm in his voice. "I thought you'd be asleep by now." Vivian stared at him. This man she'd started to trust, started to want, started to believe might actually care about her, and saw a stranger wearing a familiar face. "I couldn't sleep," she managed. Damien crossed to her, concern flickering across his features. "Are you okay? You look pale." "I'm fine." He reached out to touch her face and she flinched. The movement was instinctive, involuntary. Damien's hand froze midair. "Vivian, I'm just tired." She stepped back. "Long day." "Did something happen?" "No." The lie tasted like ash. "I just need rest." Damien studied her face like he was reading a language only he understood. "Okay," he said slowly. But if something's wrong, nothing's wrong. The lie hung between them. Damien looked like he wanted to push, wanted to demand the truth. Instead, he just nodded. Sleep well. He walked past her toward his bedroom. Vivian waited until his door closed before she moved. She went back to her room, locked the door, and pulled out her phone. The text from Sarah was still there, burning like evidence. Get out while you still can. Vivian looked around the beautiful bedroom in the isolated estate where Damien had brought her to keep her safe, or to keep her controlled. She didn't know anymore which one was true. Maybe both. Maybe neither. All she knew was that she'd escaped one cage only to walk willingly into another. And the man holding the key had convinced her it wasn't a cage at all. Morning came too fast. Vivian didn't sleep. She spent the night staring at the ceiling, trying to reconcile the Damien who'd kissed her with gentleness, and the Damien who kept files on 12 women like they were experiments. At 7, Eleanor knocked with breakfast. Mr. Varelli asked if you'd join him for coffee, she said. He's in the study. Vivian's stomach twisted. Tell him I'm not feeling well. Eleanor's expression shifted, something that might have been sympathy. He said it was important. Of course he did. Vivian forced herself to shower, to dress, to look like someone who hadn't just discovered her entire relationship was a carefully managed protocol. She found Damien in the study, exactly where she'd violated his privacy less than 12 hours ago. He looked up when she entered, and something in his expression told her he knew. We need to talk, he said. Vivian's heart hammered. About what? About the files you found last night. The blood drained from her face. Damien gestured to the desk. I had security review the footage this morning. You opened the locked box in my desk. You have cameras in here? I have cameras everywhere. His voice was flat. For security. For surveillance, you mean? Both. Damien stood slowly. So yes, I know you went through my private files. I know you found the dossiers on the other women I've helped. And I know someone contacted you to make sure you found them. Vivian's hands clenched into fists. Her name is Sarah, and she told me the truth about what you are. And what am I? A collector. The word came out sharp. Someone who finds broken women and keeps them like pets until you get bored. Damien's jaw tightened. Is that what you think this is? I think you have files on 12 women with detailed notes about their trauma and recovery patterns, like their science experiments. Vivian's voice rose. I think you relocate them under ND, as that prevent them from ever talking about you. I think you made me feel special when I'm just number 13 in a pattern you've perfected. You're wrong. Am I? Vivian pulled out her phone and showed him the text from Sarah. She warned me, said you'd make me dependent, and then erase me the moment I wasn't broken enough to need you anymore. Damien read the messages, his expression darkening. Sarah Mitchell is mentally ill, he said quietly. She refused treatment, refused therapy, got violent with the staff I hired to help her. So you abandoned her? I gave her a clean start in a new city with enough money to build a life. Damien's voice was hard. And yes, I required an NDA because she was threatening to expose my family's business operations to the FBI. Because you're criminals. Because my family operates in gray areas that wouldn't survive public scrutiny. Damien set down the phone. Sarah wasn't some innocent victim I discarded. She was a woman I tried to help who turned violent and vindictive when I wouldn't let her leverage her trauma into blackmail. And the other 11 got exactly what I promised them. Safety, new identities, fresh starts. Damien crossed his arms. The NDAs protect them as much as they protect me. Do you think those women want their abusers tracking them down through court records and news articles? The logic was sound, but Vivian's trust was already shattered. What about the notes? She demanded. The isolation protocol, the pattern assessment. You're treating me like a case study. I'm treating you like someone in crisis who needs structured support. Damien's voice was firm. Yes, I take notes. Yes, I look for patterns. Because trauma bonding is real and dangerous, and I've watched women go back to their abusers because no one gave them enough time and space to heal. So you isolate them. I give them distance from triggers while they rebuild their sense of self. Damien's eyes were hard. Would you prefer I'd left you in Chicago, where Caleb's friends are threatening you? where reporters are camped outside the residences trying to get a photo? Vivian opened her mouth, closed it. That's what I thought. Damien leaned against the desk. I'm not perfect, Vivian. I'm controlling and calculating, and I absolutely keep detailed records because that's how I protect people effectively. But I'm not collecting you. I'm not experimenting on you. I'm trying to keep you alive long enough to heal. By kissing me? By making me think? Her voice cracked. By making me want you? Damien's expression shifted. That wasn't protocol. Then what was it? A mistake. The word hit like a slap. I should never have crossed that line. You were vulnerable. You needed protection, not... He stopped. Not whatever I let this become. Vivian felt like she'd been gutted. So Sarah was right. You do get rid of them when they're not broken enough. That's not what I said. It's what you meant. Vivian's hands were shaking. The moment I started healing, the moment I wanted something real instead of just survival, I became a problem. You're not a problem. Then what am I? The question came out raw. Another file? Another successful rehabilitation? Another woman you'll relocate with an NDA in 6 months? Damien looked at her for a long moment, something that might have been pain flickering across his features. I don't know, he said finally. And that's the problem. The honesty was brutal. Vivian turned toward the door, needing air, needing space, needing anything except this conversation. Where are you going? Damien asked. Away from you. Vivian, don't. She spun back to face him. Don't tell me it's not safe. Don't tell me I need protection. Don't tell me you're doing this for my own good. Then what do you want me to say? I want you to tell me the truth. Her voice broke. Did you ever actually care about me? Or am I just another project you took on because it made you feel like you were fixing what your father broke? Damien's face went cold. That's not fair. None of this is fair, Vivian was shouting now. I trusted you. I let you in. I started believing that maybe I could have something real after everything Caleb destroyed, and you were just running a protocol. It's not a protocol when I can't stop thinking about you. Damien's voice rose to match hers. It's not a protocol when I lie awake wondering if you're okay. It's not a protocol when I want to kill every person who ever hurt you with my bare hands. The confession hung in the air between them. Vivian stared at him, chest heaving. Then why did you call it a mistake? She whispered. Damien's jaw clenched. Because you deserve better than a man who operates the way I do. You deserve someone who can love you without calculating risk factors and exit strategies. Maybe I don't want someone better. Maybe I want someone real. I'm not real. Damien's voice was raw. I'm a composite of violence and control wearing an expensive suit. Everything I touch turns into a transaction eventually, even this. So what now? Damien looked at her like he was memorizing her face. Now you decide, he said quietly. Settlement or litigation, staying or leaving, trusting me or walking away. He paused. I won't stop you either way. Vivian felt tears burning behind her eyes. This was the choice she'd been avoiding since the moment she left Chicago. Trust the man who'd saved her life but kept files on her trauma. Or walk away from the only safety she'd known in years and face Caleb's consequences alone. Before she could answer, Damien's phone rang. He glanced at it, and his entire expression changed. What? Vivian asked. Damien answered the call. Talk to me. She watched his face go from cold to murderous in the space of a heartbeat. When? He demanded. How long ago? A pause. Lock down the property. No one in or out until I say otherwise. He hung up and looked at Vivian with an expression that made her blood run cold. Caleb escaped custody 4 hours ago, he said, and according to his cell phone records, his last known location was 3 miles from this property. The world tilted. That's impossible, Vivian whispered. This place doesn't exist on any... Someone told him where you were. Damien was already moving, pulling a gun from a desk drawer she didn't know contained weapons. And the only people who knew are me, my security team, and... He stopped. His eyes went to the files scattered on his desk, to the box she'd opened last night, to the security footage he'd mentioned reviewing this morning. Sarah, Vivian breathed. She knew I was here. She texted me instructions to find the files, She wanted you to open that box. Damien's voice was ice. She wanted the location logged in the security system so she could pull it remotely. Why would she? Because I refused to give her more money when she threatened to expose my operations. Damien's jaw clenched. So she found another way to hurt me. By telling Caleb exactly where to find Vivian. The sound of breaking glass downstairs made them both freeze. Damien grabbed Vivian's arm. With me. Now. They moved fast, Damien pulling her toward a door she'd never noticed before, hidden behind a bookshelf. There's a safe room, he said. Reinforced. Panic button connects directly to... The gunshot cut him off. It came from downstairs, followed by shouting. Damien's security. And another voice Vivian would recognize anywhere. Caleb, screaming her name. Damien shoved her toward the hidden door. Get inside, lock it. Don't open it for anyone except me. What are you going to do? End this. His eyes were dark, one way or another. He kissed her hard and fast, like it might be the last time. Then he pushed her through the door and sealed it behind her. Vivian stood in the dark safe room, her heart hammering, listening to gunfire and shouting filter through the reinforced walls, and realized that everything, the protection, the isolation, the files, the kiss, the betrayal, had been leading to this moment, to Caleb finding her, to Damien standing between them, to a choice that would be made in violence instead of words. She pressed her ear against the door, trying to hear what was happening. More gunshots. Shouting. Caleb's voice, raw with rage. Where is she? Damien's response too quiet to make out, then a sound that made Vivian's blood freeze. A scream. Not Caleb's. Damien's. Vivian's hands went to the door lock, every instinct screaming at her to open it, to run to him, to... The safe room phone rang. She grabbed it with shaking hands. Hello? Vivian? Naomi's voice was tight with urgency. Listen to me very carefully. Police are 15 minutes out. Damien's security is down. You need to stay in that room no matter what you hear. Damien's hurt. Damien knew the risks. Naomi's voice was hard. Your job is to survive. His job is to make sure you do. So stay in that room and let him do his job. I can't just... You can, and you will. Naomi's voice cracked slightly. Because if you open that door, Caleb wins, and everything Damien sacrificed to protect you becomes meaningless. The line went dead. Vivian stood in the dark, tears streaming down her face, listening to the man who'd saved her life, fighting the man who'd nearly destroyed it. And she realized that trust wasn't about knowing someone would never hurt you. It was about believing they'd bleed for you when it mattered most, even if you couldn't be sure whether they loved you or were just following protocol. Even if the cage they built felt like safety or control or both. Even if trusting them meant accepting you might never know the whole truth. The gunfire stopped. Silence fell like snow. Vivian waited, barely breathing, for someone to tell her whether she was a widow or still just another case file in Damien Varelli's collection of broken women he'd tried to save. The door handle turned. Vivian grabbed the nearest object, a fire extinguisher mounted on the wall, and raised it high. The door opened, and Damien stood there, blood soaking through his shirt, exhaustion and pain and something fierce written across his features. It's over, he said. Then he collapsed. Vivian caught Damien before he hit the floor. His weight nearly took her down with him, but she braced herself against the door frame, her hands slick with his blood, her breath coming in sharp gasps. Damien, stay with me. I'm fine. His voice was rough, strained. Just give me a second. You're bleeding everywhere. Flesh wound. He pushed himself upright, wincing. Caleb? I don't know. Vivian's hands were shaking so badly she could barely keep her grip on him. What happened? He had a gun. My security took him down, but... Damien's jaw clenched. I need to see him. You need a hospital. I need to see him first. Damien pulled away from her, one hand pressed against his side where blood was seeping through his shirt. He moved like every step hurt, but his expression was locked down tight, all business, all control. Vivian followed him out of the safe room. The study was destroyed, furniture overturned, papers scattered, bullet holes in the walls, the smell of gunpowder thick in the air. Damien moved through it without looking, heading for the stairs. Sir, you should stay down. One of his security team appeared at the top of the landing, blood streaking down his face from a gash across his forehead. Where is he? Damien demanded. Living room. Marcus has him contained, but Damien was already moving. Vivian's stomach twisted as she followed him down the stairs, her heart hammering so hard she could barely hear anything else. The living room looked like a war zone. Two of Damien's security were down. One wasn't moving. The other was being tended to by Eleanor, who'd appeared from somewhere with first aid supplies and hands that moved with practiced efficiency. And in the center of the room, pinned to the floor by a man twice his size, was Caleb. He was bleeding from his shoulder. His face was bruised and swelling. His hands were zip-tied behind his back. But his eyes were still full of rage. Those eyes locked on Vivian the moment she stepped into view. There you are! His voice was thick with pain and fury. There's my girl. Vivian couldn't breathe. Seeing him here, in this place that was supposed to be safe, shattered something fundamental inside her chest. Damien stepped between them, blocking Caleb's view. Get him up, he said quietly. Marcus hauled Caleb to his knees. Caleb grunted in pain but kept his eyes on Vivian over Damien's shoulder. Look at you, Caleb said, his voice almost tender. Hiding behind another man. That's all you know how to do, isn't it? Don't. Damien's voice was ice. Don't talk to her. Don't look at her. Don't breathe in her direction. Caleb laughed, the sound wet and broken. Or what? You'll kill me? Go ahead. Make her watch what kind of man you really are. Damien pulled his gun in one smooth motion and pressed it against Caleb's forehead. The room went silent. Vivian's heart stopped. Damien, she started. This ends now, Damien said, his voice terrifyingly calm. You violated a restraining order. You escaped custody. You broke into my home. You endangered my staff. He pressed the gun harder. Give me one reason not to end you right here. Caleb smiled through the blood. Because she'll never forgive you. I don't need her forgiveness. I need her safe. She'll never be safe. Caleb's voice dropped to something intimate, directed past Damien toward Vivian. You know that, right? You know this doesn't end. I'll always find you, always, because you're mine. She's not yours. Damien's finger moved to the trigger. Stop! Vivian's voice cracked. Don't, please! Damien didn't move, didn't lower the gun, just stood there with his finger on the trigger and death in his eyes. Please, Vivian said again, quieter. Not like this. He came here to kill you. I know. He'll try again. I know. Vivian stepped forward. But if you kill him, you become what everyone's saying you are. A criminal, a murderer, and I become someone who watched it happen. Damien's jaw clenched. He doesn't deserve mercy. No, he doesn't. Vivian's voice was steady now. But I deserve to not carry his death on my conscience. So does your family, your business, everything you've built. The logic was brutal and practical and exactly what Damien understood. He lowered the gun slowly. Caleb's smile widened. That's right, good dog. Listen to your master. Damien pistol whipped him across the face so fast Vivian barely saw it happen. Caleb went down hard, blood pouring from his nose. Get him out of here, Damien said to Marcus. Secure him in the basement until the police arrive. Marcus hauled Caleb up, dragging him toward the hallway. Caleb fought even with zip-tied hands, twisting to look back at Vivian. This isn't over, he screamed. You hear me? This isn't over. I'll get out. I'll find you. The basement door slammed shut, cutting off his voice. Vivian stood frozen, her entire body shaking. Damien holstered his gun and turned to face her. His shirt was soaked through with blood now. His face was pale, but his eyes were clear. Are you hurt? He asked. Am I? Vivian stared at him. You're the one who's been shot. Grazed. I'm fine. You're not fine. You're bleeding. Vivian. He crossed to her and took her face in his hands, his touch gentle despite everything. Are you hurt? No. The word came out broken. But you, Olive. He studied her face like he was looking for cracks. Did he touch you? No, I was in the safe room like you said. Good. Damien's hands dropped. That's good. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Eleanor appeared from the kitchen. Ambulance is 5 minutes out. Police right behind them. Damien nodded. Get the staff somewhere safe. Lock down anything that doesn't need to be seen. Eleanor disappeared again with military efficiency. Damien swayed slightly. Vivian grabbed his arm. You need to sit down. I need to brief security before the police arrive. You need to not bleed to death. I'm not... He stopped, his face going even paler. Okay, maybe sitting. Vivian guided him to the couch that wasn't covered in blood or bullet holes. He sat heavily, one hand pressed against his side. Let me see, Vivian said. It's fine. Let me see. Damien moved his hand reluctantly. The wound wasn't deep, but it was long, cutting across his ribs in a line that made Vivian's stomach turn. This needs stitches, she said. I know. This is more than a graze. I know. Damien looked at her. But I'm alive. My people are alive. And you're safe. That's all that matters. The words hit harder than they should have. Vivian grabbed towels from somewhere, her hands moving on autopilot, and pressed them against the wound to slow the bleeding. Damien winced but didn't pull away. I'm sorry, Vivian said quietly. For what? For opening that box. For trusting Sarah. For... Her voice cracked. For bringing this to your door. You didn't bring anything. Caleb did. Damien's voice was firm. And Sarah manipulated you because she knew exactly which buttons to push. The files are real. I do keep detailed records. I do monitor patterns. Damien looked at her directly. But not because you're an experiment. Because trauma is complex and dangerous, and I've learned the hard way that good intentions aren't enough without data. It felt cold, clinical. It is. No apology in his voice. That's how I stay effective, how I keep people alive long enough to heal. He paused. But the notes don't tell the whole story. What's the rest of the story? Damien was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant. I care about you, he said finally. More than I should. More than is smart. More than fits into any protocol I've ever designed. His jaw tightened. And that terrifies me because caring means losing objectivity. Losing objectivity means making mistakes. And mistakes in my world get people killed. Vivian pressed harder on the wound as fresh blood seeped through the towels. I don't know how to trust you, she admitted. I know, but I don't know how to walk away either. I know that too. Damien's hand covered hers, warm despite the blood. So we'll figure it out, after we survive the next few hours. The sirens were loud now, right outside. Doors slammed, voices shouted. Footsteps thundered across the porch. Milwaukee PD, hands where we can see them. Damien raised his hand slowly, wincing as the movement pulled at his wound. Vivian did the same. A dozen officers flooded into the room, guns drawn, voices overlapping in commands. Down on the ground! Show me your hands! Is anyone else in the building? Damien spoke calmly, his voice cutting through the chaos. My name is Damien Varelli. This is my property. The intruder is secured in the basement. My head of security will provide you with a full briefing. One of the officers, older, gray-haired, with the kind of face that had seen too much, stepped forward. Mr. Varelli, we've been looking for Caleb Rayner since he escaped custody this morning. His eyes went to Damien's wound. You need medical attention. Paramedics are outside, another officer said. I'm fine. Check my staff first. 2 injured in the initial breach. Sir, that's not a request. The officer studied Damien for a long moment, then nodded. Get the medics in here. The next hour was chaos. Paramedics swarmed the house, treating the wounded security team first like Damien demanded, then forcing him onto a stretcher despite his protests. Police photographed everything, bagged evidence, took statements from everyone who could talk. Caleb was brought up from the basement on a stretcher, screaming obscenities and threats until someone sedated him. Vivian watched him disappear into an ambulance, flanked by 2 officers, and felt nothing. No relief, no fear, just numbness. Naomi arrived an hour later, moving through the crime scene like she owned it, her briefcase full of documentation and her voice full of authority. She found Vivian sitting on the porch steps, wrapped in a blanket someone had given her, staring at nothing. Are you hurt? Naomi asked. No. Good. Naomi sat down beside her. Then listen very carefully. The police are going to want a full statement. Everything that happened, Everything Caleb said, everything Damien did. Okay, you need to be very clear about the timeline. Caleb broke in, threatened you. Damien's security responded. Damien protected you. Naomi's voice was firm. This was self-defense on private property, nothing more. Vivian looked at her. He almost killed him. But he didn't. Naomi's expression was unreadable. Because you stopped him, which makes you the hero of this story, not the victim. The word landed strange. Hero? Vivian didn't feel like a hero. She felt like someone who'd barely survived another disaster. Where is he? Vivian asked. Damien, hospital. They're stitching him up now. Naomi paused. He'll be fine. The wound looked worse than it was. And Caleb? Critical condition. Gunshot to the shoulder, broken ribs, concussion. Naomi's voice was clinical. He'll live, and then he'll go to prison for a very long time. How long? Escape from custody, violation of a restraining order, armed home invasion, assault with a deadly weapon, attempted murder. Naomi ticked them off like items on a grocery list. 20 years minimum, probably more. 20 years. Caleb would be in his 50s when he got out, if he got out. What about Sarah? Vivian asked. Naomi's expression hardened. Being dealt with. What does that mean? It means she aided a fugitive, provided him with classified information, and conspired to endanger your life. Naomi's voice was ice. She'll face federal charges, and unlike Caleb, she won't have family money to post bail. The justice was swift and brutal, and exactly what Damien's world delivered. I need to see him, Vivian said. The hospital won't allow visitors until... I don't care what they'll allow. Vivian stood. Take me to him. Naomi studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded. I'll drive. The hospital was chaos. News crews camped outside, police maintaining perimeter, reporters shouting questions at anyone who looked like they might have information. Naomi navigated through it all with practiced ease, flashing credentials that opened doors and silenced questions. They found Damien on the 4th floor, in a private room guarded by 2 of his security team who'd somehow beaten them here despite their own injuries. Marcus nodded at Vivian. He's awake. Been asking for you. Vivian pushed open the door. Damien lay in the hospital bed, shirtless, his torso wrapped in bandages, an IV in his arm feeding him fluids and probably pain medication. He looked exhausted, but alive. His eyes opened when she entered. You shouldn't be here. Neither should you. Vivian crossed to the bed. How bad? 23 stitches, mild concussion from where I hit the floor, bruised ribs. He tried to sit up and winced. I'll live. Stop moving. Stop worrying. I'll stop worrying when you stop getting shot protecting me. Something shifted in Damien's expression. That's not going to happen. Getting shot? Protecting you. His voice was quiet. Even if you walk away after this, even if you decide you can't trust me, I'll still make sure you're safe. Vivian sank into the chair beside the bed, exhaustion hitting her all at once. I don't know what I'm going to do, she admitted. You don't have to decide now. When? When you're ready. Damien's hand found hers on the bed rail. I'm not going anywhere. You almost died. But I didn't. His grip tightened. And Caleb's going to prison for decades. You're free, Vivian, actually free. No more running, no more hiding, no more looking over your shoulder. The words should have felt like relief. Instead, they felt like standing at the edge of a cliff with no idea what came next. What if I don't know how to be free? Vivian whispered. Then you learn. Damien's thumb traced circles on her palm. One day at a time. One choice at a time. One breath at a time. Tears burned behind Vivian's eyes. I'm still angry at you, she said. About the files, the secrets, the way you treat helping people like a business transaction. I know. But I'm also, She stopped, the words catching in her throat. I'm also grateful and confused, and maybe something else I'm not ready to name yet. That's enough. Is it? For now. Damien's eyes were dark. We have time to figure out the rest. A knock at the door interrupted them. A doctor entered, clipboard in hand. Mr. Virelli, I need to run some tests. 5 minutes, Damien said. Sir? 5 minutes. The doctor looked at Vivian, then back at Damien, then sighed. 5 minutes. Then I'm kicking everyone out. He left. Damien turned back to Vivian. There's something you need to know. What? The settlement offer. Caleb's lawyer withdrew it this morning, before the escape. Damien's jaw tightened. They were never serious. They were stalling while Sarah helped Caleb plan this. Vivian's blood went cold. They were working together from the beginning? Looks like it. Sarah wanted revenge. Caleb wanted you back. His lawyer wanted to bleed me dry in litigation. Damien's voice was flat. They coordinated the whole thing. How long have you known? I suspected after Sarah contacted you, confirmed it when my people traced the burner phone she used back to Caleb's lawyer's office. He paused. That's why I came back early from Chicago. I knew something was wrong. You didn't tell me. I didn't want to panic you until I had proof. So you kept more secrets? Yes. No apology. Because sometimes protecting people means carrying information they're not ready for. Vivian wanted to be angry, but she was too tired, too wrung out, too aware that Damien's secrets had probably saved her life. I hate that you're right, she said. I know. I hate that I need you. I know that too. I hate, her voice cracked. I hate that I'm falling in love with someone I'm not sure I can trust. Damien went still. Vivian realized what she'd said and felt her face go hot. I didn't mean...
Yes, you did. Damien's voice was rough. And for what it's worth, I've been in love with you since you walked into that conference room trying to hide bruises and pretending you were fine. The confession hit like lightning. That was 3 months ago, Vivian whispered. I know. You've been lying about it this whole time. I've been trying not to take advantage of someone in crisis. Damien's eyes were fierce. There's a difference. Is there?
Yes. His hand tightened on hers. Because I would have walked away, would have handed you off to someone else, would have kept my distance, if I thought staying close was hurting you more than helping. But you didn't walk away. Because you asked me not to. Damien's voice dropped. Every time I tried to create distance, you pulled me back. Every time I tried to be professional, you looked at me like... He stopped. Like maybe you felt it too. Vivian couldn't breathe. I did, she admitted. I do. But that doesn't mean I know what to do about it. Then don't do anything. Damien's thumb traced her knuckles. Just exist. Just heal. Just be. And you'll what? Wait around hoping I figure it out? Yes. That's insane. Probably. A ghost of a smile. But I've built an empire on calculated risks. This one's worth it. The doctor knocked again, more insistent this time. Time's up, he called through the door. Damien didn't let go of Vivian's hand. Come back, he said quietly. When you're ready, however long it takes. What if I'm never ready? Then I'll still be here. His voice was certain. Because that's what love means when it's real. It doesn't have conditions. It doesn't have timelines. It just is. Vivian leaned forward and kissed him. Soft, careful, tasting like tears and blood and something that felt dangerously close to hope. When she pulled back, Damien's eyes were bright. Go, he said, before the doctor calls security. Vivian stood, her hand lingering in his until the distance forced them apart. She was at the door when he spoke again. Vivian, she turned. I meant what I said, about the files, about the protocol. Damien's voice was quiet. You're not number 13. You're the one that broke the pattern, the one that made me realize I was using data to avoid feeling anything real. The words settled in her chest like stones in deep water. Vivian didn't trust herself to speak. She just nodded and walked out before she could change her mind about leaving. Naomi was waiting in the hallway, leaning against the wall with her phone out. The press is going insane, she said without looking up. Billionaire shootout with escaped convict. They're already writing the headlines. What are they saying? That you're a victim, that Damien's a hero, that Caleb's a monster. Naomi finally looked up, which happens to be accurate for once. Vivian leaned against the wall beside her, exhaustion pressing down on her shoulders. What happens now? Now you give a statement to the police. Probably tomorrow after you've rested.
Naomi's voice was businesslike. Then you decide what you want your life to look like. I don't know what I want. Yes, you do. Naomi's expression softened slightly. You're just afraid of wanting it. What if I want the wrong thing? Then you adjust. Naomi put her phone away. But Vivian, running from what you want because you're afraid is just another kind of cage. The truth of it hit hard. Vivian had spent 3 years in a cage with Caleb, then 3 months in a different kind of cage with Damien, one built of protection and distance and careful boundaries. But both were still cages, and freedom meant choosing to step outside them, even if she didn't know what waited on the other side. Take me back to the estate, Vivian said. Are you sure? We can find you a hotel. I'm sure. Naomi studied her for a moment, then nodded. Let's go. They left the hospital through a service exit, avoiding the press camped out front. The drive back to Wisconsin was quiet. Vivian stared out the window, watching the city give way to highway, give way to forest, and tried to imagine what her life looked like now. No Caleb, no immediate danger, no crisis forcing her into someone else's protection. Just choices. Real ones. Hers to make. It should have felt liberating. Instead, it felt terrifying. Because choosing meant risk. And risk meant the possibility of being hurt again. But maybe that was the point. Maybe freedom wasn't the absence of risk. Maybe it was the right to choose which risks were worth taking. They arrived at the estate after dark. The property was still swarming with police, crime scene investigators, technicians photographing bullet holes and documenting evidence. Naomi walked Vivian through it all, deflecting questions, handling logistics, making sure she got to her room without being interrogated. Eleanor had already cleaned and turned down the bed. Vivian collapsed into it fully clothed, too exhausted to even consider showering. She slept for 14 hours straight. When she woke, sunlight was streaming through the windows and Eleanor was setting a breakfast tray on the bedside table. Good morning, Eleanor said gently. Or good afternoon, technically. It's almost 2. Vivian sat up slowly, her body aching in places she didn't know could ache. How's Damien? Stable. Naomi said he'll be released tomorrow. Eleanor poured coffee. He's been asking about you every hour. Tell him I'm fine. I'll tell him you're alive. He'll know the difference. Vivian almost smiled. She ate mechanically, tasting nothing, while Eleanor bustled around the room straightening things that didn't need straightening. Eleanor? Yes? How long have you worked for Damien? 18 years. Have you seen... Vivian struggled for words. Have you seen him do this before? Help women like me? Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. I've seen him help many people, she said carefully, but I've never seen him look at any of them the way he looks at you. What's the difference? The others were projects, obligations, ways to atone for things that weren't his fault. Eleanor met her eyes. You're the first one who made him forget to be careful. The words settled heavy. Is that good or bad? Vivian asked. That depends on what you do with it. Eleanor left before Vivian could ask what she meant. Vivian spent the rest of the day walking the property, avoiding the areas still cordoned off by police, trying to process everything that had happened in the past 24 hours. Caleb was going to prison. Sarah was facing federal charges. Damien was recovering from a gunshot wound, and Vivian was free. Actually free. For the first time in 3 years. The realization hit her standing at the edge of the forest, watching afternoon light filter through pine trees. She could go anywhere, do anything, be anyone. She didn't have to stay here, didn't have to wait for Damien, didn't have to figure out whether love built on trauma could survive in peacetime. She could walk away, start over somewhere new, build a life that was entirely hers. The thought should have been appealing. Instead, it felt hollow. Because somewhere in the past 3 months, Damien had become more than her protector. He'd become the first person who saw her completely and didn't ask her to be smaller. And walking away from that felt less like freedom and more like running from the only real thing she'd built since escaping Caleb. Vivian pulled out her phone and called the hospital. The nurse connected her to Damien's room. He answered on the first ring. Are you okay? I'm fine. Vivian took a breath. I need you to answer something honestly. Always. If I asked you to delete those files, all of them, including mine, would you? Damien was quiet for a long moment. Yes,
he said finally, if that's what you need to trust me. Even though it goes against everything you believe about protecting people. Even though, his voice was firm, because protecting you means respecting your boundaries, even when they conflict with my instincts. Vivian closed her eyes. Don't delete them, she said. What? Don't delete them. Keep your records, keep your data, keep your protocols. She opened her eyes. But stop treating me like I'm one of them. You're not. I know, you told me, but I need to see it. Vivian's voice was steady. I need you to show me that I'm different, not with words, with actions. What do you want me to do? Come back here, heal, and then... She took a breath. And then let's figure out what this is. For real, no protocols, no distance, no careful boundaries designed to protect me from you. Vivian, I'm not asking for forever, I'm asking for honest. Her voice cracked slightly. Can you give me that? Damien's breath was audible over the line. Yes, he said quietly, I can give you honest. Even if it's messy? Especially if it's messy. Vivian felt something tight in her chest finally start to loosen. Okay, she said. Okay? I'll be here. When you get back. And we'll try. Try what? Being something other than protector and protected. Vivian looked out at the forest. Being equals. Partners. Whatever that looks like. I don't know if I know how to be an equal partner, Damien admitted. I'm used to being in control. Then you'll learn. Vivian's voice was firm. The same way I'm learning how to not need saving. Damien was quiet for a long moment. I love you, he said, in case that wasn't clear. It was clear. Vivian smiled despite the tears burning behind her eyes. But it's nice to hear anyway. I'll say it as many times as you need. Once was enough. She paused. For now. They hung up. Vivian stood in the Wisconsin forest, watching the sun sink toward the horizon, and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not safety. Not fear. Just possibility. The sound of tires on gravel made her turn. A car was pulling up the drive. Not Naomi's sedan. Something smaller. Unfamiliar. Vivian's chest tightened as the driver's door opened. A woman stepped out. Blonde, early 30s, expensive clothes that tried too hard to look casual. Her face was familiar in a way that made Vivian's stomach drop. She'd seen it in one of the files. Jennifer Zhao. Number 7. The woman crossed the lawn slowly, her hands visible, her expression unreadable. Vivian Mercer? She called out. Vivian's hand went to her phone. Don't come any closer. I'm not here to hurt you. Jennifer stopped 20 feet away. I'm here to warn you. About what? About him. Jennifer's voice was hard. About what happens when the honeymoon ends and you're not broken enough anymore to keep his interest. You're wrong about him. Am I? Jennifer pulled out her phone and held it up. Then explain this. She turned the screen toward Vivian. It showed a document, legal letterhead, dated 2 days ago. A settlement agreement between Damien Varelli and Jennifer Zhao for $200,000. In exchange for her silence about certain allegations regarding Mr. Varelli's business practices and personal conduct. Vivian's blood went cold. He paid you off, she said slowly. He paid me to go away. There's a difference. Jennifer's smile was bitter. Just like he'll pay you eventually, when you stop being grateful enough, when you start asking too many questions, when you become more trouble than you're worth. That's not... It's already starting, isn't it? Jennifer stepped closer. The doubts, the secrets, the feeling like you don't really know who he is underneath the careful protection. Vivian couldn't answer, because it was true. All of it. He's not a savior, Jennifer said quietly. He's a collector. And you're the newest piece in his gallery. But the moment you crack, the moment you stop being perfect, broken, beautiful thing he can fix, he'll discard you like all the rest. Why are you telling me this? Because I was you. 6 months ago, standing in this same place thinking I'd found someone who actually cared. Jennifer's voice cracked. And then I healed. And suddenly the protection became surveillance. The care became control. And when I tried to leave, he made it very clear that walking away meant walking away with nothing. So you took the money. I took the money because fighting him meant destroying myself. He has lawyers, resources, power I couldn't touch. Jennifer's eyes were hard. So yes, I took the money and the NDA and the new life in a city where no one knows my name, because that's what he offers women like us: silence or destruction. Vivian felt like the ground was dissolving beneath her feet. I don't believe you, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Jennifer heard it too. You will, she said quietly. When it happens to you, when you see the man behind the mask, when you realize every kindness had a price tag you didn't see coming. She turned toward her car. Wait, Vivian called out. The settlement. Why did he pay you if you were the problem? Jennifer paused, her hand on the car door. Because I have evidence, she said, about his family's operations, about the people who disappeared after asking too many questions, about the real cost of crossing Damien Varelli. She looked back at Vivian. And he knew that if it went public, it would destroy more than his reputation. It would destroy the carefully constructed lie that he's anything other than his father's son. She got in the car and drove away, leaving Vivian standing alone in the fading light. And for the first time since Caleb's arrest, Vivian wondered if she'd just escaped one nightmare only to walk into another. One that came with expensive suits and gentle hands and promises that sounded like forever, but might just be another kind of cage. Her phone buzzed. A text from Damien. They're releasing me tonight instead of tomorrow. I'll be home by midnight. Can't wait to see you. Vivian stared at the message. Home. He'd called the estate home. Like she belonged here. Like she belonged to him. She looked up at the massive house surrounded by forest and security and secrets, and realized that loving Damien Varelli meant accepting she might never know the whole truth about who he was or what he'd done, or whether his love came with conditions she couldn't see yet. It meant choosing trust over certainty. It meant risking everything she'd rebuilt for the possibility of something real. Vivian typed a response. I'll be waiting. Then she walked back inside to wait for a man she loved and feared in equal measure, and prayed that when the truth finally came out, whatever it was, she'd be strong enough to survive it. Because the only thing more terrifying than being hurt again was realizing she might already be too far in to walk away. Even if everything Jennifer said was true, even if Damien was exactly what everyone warned her about, even if love was just another word for the most beautiful cage she'd ever lived in. The door closed behind her with a sound like finality. And somewhere in the Wisconsin darkness, headlights cut through the trees as Damien Varelli came home to the woman who'd broken all his carefully constructed rules, neither of them knowing yet whether that breaking would save them both, or destroy everything they'd tried to build from the ruins of their damage. Vivian stood in the main hall watching headlights cut through the darkness beyond the windows. Her chest felt tight. Her hands were cold. Jennifer Zhao's words echoed in her skull like a warning she couldn't unhear. He's a collector, and you're the newest piece in his gallery. The car stopped in front of the house. Damien stepped out slowly, moving like every breath hurt. He was dressed in clothes someone must have brought him. Dark jeans, a shirt that hung loose to avoid pressing against his bandages. His face was pale, but his eyes were sharp, scanning the property with the automatic vigilance of a man who'd survived by noticing everything. Marcus emerged from the driver's side and said something Vivian couldn't hear through the glass. Damien nodded and walked toward the house. Vivian's pulse hammered. She should greet him at the door, should help him inside, should play the part of the grateful woman whose protector had come home. Instead, she stood frozen, watching him climb the steps with careful, deliberate movements, and wondered if she was about to make the biggest mistake of her life. The door opened. Damien stopped when he saw her standing there in the half-light, her arms wrapped around herself like she was holding something together that wanted to break. Hey, he said quietly. Hey. His eyes searched her face. What's wrong? Nothing. Vivian. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. I've seen you lie to protect yourself for months. I know what it looks like. So tell me what happened. She should ease into it, should wait until he'd rested, should choose her moment carefully. Instead, the words came out raw and direct. Jennifer Zhao was here. Damien went completely still,